Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
and Ms. Hamilton.
Abstain.
Ms. Hamilton abstains, so it's a unanimous vote of the 4 voting members. Congratulations, Heather, on your election as chair, your re-election as chair.
Thank you. And thank you very much to each one of my board members.
And now we will proceed with the election of the vice chair of the select board, and nominations are in order at this time. Are there any nominations? Yes, Ms. Hamilton.
I would like to nominate John Van Scoyac.
Ms. Hamilton nominates John Van Scoyac for vice chair of the board. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I'll order the nomination period closed, and we will call for a vote. All those voting in favor of John Van Scoyac as chair will say aye, and those opposed, no. I'll call the roll. Mr. Sandman,
Vice Chair, I think you meant to say.
vice chair.
Yes,
Pardon
aye.
me.
I almost got a promotion.
Thank you. Ms. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
and Ms. Ashkenazi,
Aye.
and Mr. Van Scoyac.
Following the lead of the chair, I will abstain.
Okay, so that is a 4-0 unanimous vote for those voting, and we'll declare John Van Scoyac as vice chair of the board. Congratulations, John.
Thank you.
At this point, I'll turn the board meeting over to Heather Hamilton, the newly elected chair of the board.
Thank you very much. And I am very pleased that we decided to continue a new tradition of having a vice chair. When I joined the board, we didn't have that position, and I think it's become very useful for a variety of reasons. The biggest to me is that we have 2 select board members at the agenda setting meeting. So when the select board chair is either out of the country or her car breaks down on the Canadian border and is unexpectedly absent from a meeting, things can continue seamlessly. Redundancy is something that I don't like very much, but sometimes it comes in useful when you know exactly why you have a redundant process. So with that being said, let's get to announcements and updates. I believe our newest member, Mike Salmon, has something that he would like to share. And then I believe Miriam Ashkenazi has one, and then I'll recognize Bernard.
Thank you. And I want to say thank you to the voters. During the election, I tried to talk to as many people from as many perspectives as I could. And one thing I have to say is I can't promise to satisfy everyone, and certainly not satisfy everyone all the time. But I do promise to listen. And to that end, I'll have a website up, not the election website, election campaign website, but rather a website up with a link to my calendar so that anybody who's interested can book a time when I'm available, and we can have a conversation, Zoom, telephone, or hopefully in person as we go further through the process of getting used to living with COVID. I have just a very small number of priorities that I've written out for myself. And first and foremost is to work with my colleagues to develop a set of priorities for the town of Brookline, priorities that we can use.
Recording in progress.
Formulate the FY24 budget and beyond. So I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk about that in more detail later. And thanks again.
Great, thank you. Miriam?
Great, thank you very much.
Recording in progress.
First, let me say congratulations. Oops. First, let me mute myself. There we go. First, let me say congratulations to you, Mike, and welcome. I'm excited to be working with you. And I want to say congratulations to the newly elected and returning town meeting members. As we approach the spring town meeting, you will see that there is a lot of political discourse about voting on warrant articles, the town meeting listserv, and how to otherwise engage actively and thoughtfully in our democracy. Second, I do have a comment to make about the recent election and the functioning of our democracy. I have debated for quite some time to comment on this issue at all. I am weighing my public commitment to this town to the high probability that making critical or negative statements at all about the Brookline Police Union will likely result in receiving intimidating threats, attacks on social media, and possibly doxing. This is based on what has happened to my fellow Brookline citizens when they have done the same. I truly hope I am wrong. But that therein lies the problem. I should be able to feel safe to comment without having to wring my hands over how this will impact me personally. Worse, how it might affect my children. That said, I feel compelled, at the very least, to express my disappointment at the letter sent out by the police union to dissuade voters from supporting those running for town meeting who had voted to reduce the police budget. I also voted to reduce the police budget and would do so again. To be perfectly clear, I know that the police union had every right to send the letter. Police officers have constitutional protections, and this is what the First Amendment is about. They should be able to criticize and be critical of me in my political role with no fear of retaliation, and they do. This is how democracy works. However, I think it was unprofessional and in poor judgment to send letters that were construed by many citizens as threatening and misrepresented the vote as defunding the police rather than a reduction in the police budget overall. We are being asked to trust the police union and those it represents as professionals. A letter like this does not, in my opinion, engender trust. Again, welcome to the new town meeting members and welcome back to those who have been reelected. I look forward to a robust debate in the next few weeks where there will be a lot of disagreement. A few more quick announcements. The Cannabis Mitigation Committee is looking for 2 new members. I'm helping you out here, Mike, because I'm handing that over to you. One for Coolidge Corner and one representing Brookline Village. So please think about applying. And finally, for those of you that don't know, I'm a single mom of 2. Tuesday evening meetings that go to 11 p.m. in person have been quite a challenge. Even though my kids are technically old enough to feed and water themselves, they somehow don't manage to do it if I'm not around. So starting this evening, if it looks like the meetings will be going past 9 p.m., then sometime around 8:30 or 9, I will hijack myself home and take the second half of these meetings remotely. So thank you for your understanding of that.
Great, thank you. Bernard?
Okay, I'd also like to congratulate Mike Sandman for his election to the select board. It's going to be a fun ride. But one of the benefits, excuse me. God. You have to learn a lot in this job. So again, I'd like to congratulate Mike Sandman for his election to the select board. It's going to be a fun ride. But you know, one thing about Mike is that he has a lot of experience in town government, both on the Advisory Committee, I believe, before on the Transportation Board and a few other places, which are heavy lifting type civic engagement. So you'll need that experience and that knowledge as you join the select board, especially in these times, as Miriam has indicated. Okay, a couple comments. First of all, Sunday's program produced by the Mlk Committee, A Family Revealed from Slavery to Hope, was a great success. And it was a great thought-provoking discussion of the idols to Confederate generals and to slavery that still haunt America. That program was videotaped by BIG and will be on the town's website at the Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Committee webpage within the next couple of days. And anyone who was not able to attend, I urge them to watch it. It was very, very good discussion by 2 incredible people. And related to that, the King Committee is looking for new members. And I don't want to put her on the spot, but I did ask Wallace Reamer if she would apply, and I hope she does. But there are other openings, and if people are interested in joining our committee, which does a lot of programming, not just the MLK holiday event, but programming throughout the year that is very, very interesting and useful. So the next thing I want to mention is we're going to be voting on item 4G, which is a grant to the police department from the Lauren Dunn Astley Memorial Fund that Sergeant Casey Hatchett obtained. It will fund overtime for an after-school program taught by the AWARE Youth Resource Officers at the Public Safety Building in late May or early June. The program will present students with important information and resources on cyber awareness, substance use and addiction, and healthy dating relationships. And you know, this is particularly, the latter is particularly important because Lauren Dunn Astley was killed in 2011 by a former boyfriend as she was getting ready to attend college and start life as an adult. This program and similar programs is designed to help students identify unhealthy and dangerous relationships and give them tools to protect themselves in what the school aware program presented to in programming that the school resource officers used to present to the schools, to students in the schools. This is critically important because the issue of domestic violence, dating violence, as well as family violence is not something that escapes communities like Brookline or any community. And it's happening here. We just don't know about it because of confidentiality issues. But, thankfully, the police department has taken up the task of providing this type of training, even though the schools terminated their efforts a couple of years ago. So.
Great.
That's
Thank
it.
you, Bernard. John.
Thank you, Heather. Congratulations, Mike. Congratulations, Heather. Thanks to my fellow board members for showing me the confidence of being the vice chair of this group. I just pray that the day never comes that I have to read through all of the consent agenda, which Heather does with such great aplomb. 3 quick announcements. First of all, there was a really, really fun gala fundraiser at the Teen Center on Thursday. Alicia Adamson's doing a great job leading that particular organization. We got to hear some teen musicians perform. They were terrific. Everybody had a good time. Interestingly enough, the Teen Center Gala is the event by which I mark the beginning and hopefully the almost end of COVID, because it was just before everything shut down that they had their gala in 2020. And now that it's 2022 and things are sort of coming back to life, they had their gala again for the first time since the advent of COVID. And it's great to see people coming out and having a good time again. I also was privileged to have the assignment of reading a proclamation drafted by the town of Brookline in honor of Frederick Law Olmsted, not one, but 2 occasions. First of all, at Jamaica Pond, where there was a ceremony honoring Frederick Law Olmsted on his 200th birthday anniversary. America's greatest landscape architect. Then again at the Spring Fest on Saturday at our own Olmsted Park. I just wanted to say, and I don't know if Devin is the one to get the credit, but perhaps not, but Devin, that proclamation, whoever wrote it, it was really well written. And people kept coming up to me afterwards and saying, you did a great job with that proclamation. I said, I didn't write it, but thank you very much. So somebody at Town Hall deserves great tribute for the excellence of that proclamation. And then finally, I just want to say a word about someone who passed away. But boy, is this guy well-known and well-loved in Brookline. His name is Marshall Smith. I think a lot of people will immediately recognize that name. Marshall is the Smith behind Brookline Booksmith. And Brookline Booksmith, along with Coolidge Corner Movie House, is such a mainstay of Brookline's commercial vitality. It's commercial vitality at Coolidge Corner in particular, but just the commercial vitality of our town. Brookline Booksmith is one of those enterprises that is so successful. The word of its success has spread way beyond Brookline. It survived when bookstore after bookstore after bookstore was shutting down. It survived COVID. It's stronger and bigger than ever. And Marshall's son, Jed, spread the word in the last couple of days that Marshall had passed. And I'm just going to read a couple of words from Jed's, the tribute that Jed passed along. A great man, sweetheart, dad, son, brother, uncle, friend, creative spirit, and legendary retail entrepreneur. Marshall absolutely loved the Booksmith, and what a gift to Brookline and our community. It was 1961 when he and Judy Smith decided that the burgeoning publication of serious literature in a paperback format provided the opportunity to reach a whole new audience of potential readers, and the success of the Booksmith just took off from there. It survived competition from Barnes and Noble. And the final note I thought was one that was particularly interesting about Marshall. He was, again, in the tribute that Jed passed along, Marshall was one of the greatest readers of all time. For decades, he would read 3 or 4 books at a time. Quite astonishing. 2 weeks before he passed, he was proud that he read Moby Dick again. And here's a quote, it's 850 pages, you know, while also reading a nonfiction account of early Boston leaders. On his reading stand today sits a Ken Follett novel open to page 699, only 103 pages to go. So as Marshall was famous for saying, and he said this when he retired, I'll see you all in the aisles. And a good way to pay tribute to Marshall Smith would be to pay another visit to Brookline Booksmith and say hello to your friends in the aisles. It's a great Brookline institution. He was the founder of it and a great man.
Great, thank you so much, John. So I have 2 very quick updates, and then we are going to hear from Ben Kaufman, our town clerk, on the results of the election. So let me just dispense with these 2. Safe Routes to School, Brookline presents the 2nd annual bike rodeo this Sunday, May 15th at the Town Hall and Pierce School parking lot. Join us for this fun event focused on bike safety, proper helmet adjustment, hand signals, and a skills course. It will end with a ride out through the neighborhood. Use the QR code on the town's website to sign up for your spot between 10 a.m. and 1:30 p.m. Again, this Sunday, May 15th. And then also, Public Service Recognition Week was last week. Many town departments and employees were highlighted on the town's social media and in a press release issued today. Thank you to all of our employees. Take it away, Ben.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Select Board. My name is Ben Kaufman. I am the town clerk. As you guys know, on May 3rd, 2022, Brookline had its annual town election. This is a very unique election. There were no competitive races for townwide office, no ballot questions at the top of the ballot, but because of redistricting, there were 319 candidates running for 246 town meeting seats across the town. So on May 3rd, we elected a new select board member, and I welcome Select Board Member Salmon, new and returning library trustees, new and returning school committee members, new and returning constables, and many returning, as well as close to 80 new town meeting members. A lack of competitive races at the top of the ticket could point to a lower expected turnout. The last time there were no competitive select board races and no ballot question at the top of the ticket, turnout was single digits, 6%. Turnout this year was 18%, putting it in the area of the 2021 annual town election, which had both a competitive select board race and 2 competitive ballot questions. This election did not have expanded early and mail-in voting options. However, we did offer traditional absentee ballot voting as we had prior to the COVID pandemic, and 709 voters cast absentee ballots, either by mail or over the counter. This election was different in many ways. There was a new precinct as a result of redistricting. There were new polling locations, new voting machines, and a new town clerk. All these changes were incorporated smoothly into the election. The experiences we heard from voters on election day demonstrated an appreciation for the work done for this election and a commitment to civic participation and pride in Brookline. This is a testament to the hard work of our election workers, our wardens, clerks, and inspectors. They were at the polling locations from 6 a.m. until the votes were tallied well after 8 o'clock. Many were new election workers working for the first time. Some were town hall staff who went out to fill holes caused by COVID. Many wardens and clerks were serving in leadership roles for the first time and stepped up to the challenge. All of them have made me confident in our ability to continue to execute our elections in the fall and beyond. They deserve our thanks. I also would like to thank the numerous departments and outside organizations who make Election Day happen. The Brookline School Department, the libraries, the Senior Center, the Fire Department, Brookline Housing Authority, and Boston University all opened their doors and donated their spaces to host polling locations on Election Day. Thank you to the Department of Public Works, the Brookline Police Department, and every department in town hall whose staff works hard in the days before and after election day and who work all day on election day itself to ensure we have a smooth election. Election day is a tremendous example of the town coming together for a single cause, and seeing the hard work done by staff from every department made me proud of our town employees. A special thanks to Mike Kilgallen and to Kelly Durgan and their teams for the late nights and weekends that they worked. And the biggest thanks I want to give is owed to the team here in the town clerk's office. Elections are never easy. They are difficult and technical and time consuming and require the work of a large team of dedicated individuals. This election was not what we had planned. Many of you may not know, but exactly 1 week before Election Day, several staff in the town clerk's office, including myself, tested positive for COVID. Town clerk team stepped up. Those who are healthy worked extra hours in the office, ensuring work got done. Those who were home sick continued to work remotely, developing election materials. Staff came to the office on weekends, late at night, and worked until the wee hours of the morning, preparing for Election Day. A warden actually called me on Election Day concerned because in the top right corner of the voting list, it said it was printed out at 1:15 a.m. And I informed them that that was the time it was printed because that was when my staff was working. The fact that many people never knew we were sick at all is a testament to the hard work that the staff in the town clerk's office did. Alicia Hill, Farisa Jimenez, Danelle Diaz, Catherine Lopez, and Michael Hecht deserve the thanks of this board and of the town as a whole. We now look towards May town meeting and beyond that to the fall, when we will all go back and do it again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ben. And you have our deepest gratitude for executing a very well-run election. Bernard.
Yeah, I'd like to also thank you for running an incredible election, but also thank the many people who came out to serve as election inspectors and in other positions. And I'd like to specifically talk about a couple people at Precinct 4 that I had a chance to talk to and spend time with. First of all, Warren Goodman, 101 years old, an election inspector who really, and he wasn't just sitting there, waiting for people to come up to him. He was actively dealing with the issues that came up during the election. What an incredible person. The other person is, oh God. Okay, Mike.
No worries.
Mine went blank.
Take your time.
Anyway.
It'll come to you when you stop
Yeah.
trying to force
Well,
it.
let's just leave it at Warren Goodman.
Okay.
An incredible person. I mean, when I talked to him, I was just flabbergasted that he was so alert and so actively working at the polls to help the election go smoothly. So
Oh, that's
he-
so
he
refreshing.
deserves-
A couple of years ago, I was making calls to get people, to come out and vote for one of our overrides. And I remember talking to a gentleman that said, "I'm too old to vote." Well, is that a thing? So it's refreshing to know that not everybody feels that way.
Yeah.
Any questions for Ben about the election? Any other words of gratitude? John?
Yeah, Ben knows well that I have been in touch with him, and I am one of those people that's endlessly curious about things like how many people actually voted early in this election campaign, because as everyone knows, we went through 2 years of discovering the virtues or whatever of mail-in balloting. Did it in robust fashion during COVID. Thankfully did not have to do it in order for there to even be an election this time around. So we don't have, I don't think we've got the final numbers tonight, but if Ben has them, he'll be happy to share them, I'm sure. I just think it's worth noting that Brookline dealt with COVID thanks to people like Ben, thanks to all those people in the office. I never dreamed that they would have to conduct an election while down with COVID. And so, Ben, that's just an extraordinary story. And thank you very much on behalf of the entire town. Great job. Great job.
Thank you so much, Ben. I know that we're going to see you a little bit later for an issue that has come up that we hopefully will help you and your staff out on. So sit tight. Great. So let's move into public comment. Our new vice chair will field this if we have anyone.
Yeah, if we have anyone, we'll find out very shortly. People who watch these meetings regularly are familiar with the introductions that Fernandez would do and do eloquently to the public comment segment. I don't have that in front of me, and I'm ad-libbing, as you can probably tell. The point is simply to say to those who want to offer public comment to please observe that there is a 3-minute time limit as much as possible. We would love it if folks avoided a lot of repetition. And as much as possible, we would appreciate it, and I think everyone in town would appreciate it, if people treated the public comment segment like a conversation with their neighbors. And if you follow the same rule you would follow in a conversation with your neighbors, we'll all be fine, and I won't have to explain the rules any further. And with that, Devin, who is the timekeeper, do we have any people signed up for public comment?
No one has signed up in advance. At this time, there are 6 attendees. No one is using the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
If that is the case, then thanks to Devin for that announcement. And if folks will remember that public comment is at this point in the meeting on a regular basis, and maybe they'll come back next week. We'll see.
Or they're saving it for the warrant article hearings later
There's a
on
warrant
our
article
agenda.
hearing going on right now that I think has a lot of
Interest.
normal attendees that would be here tonight are there making their public comment.
Excellent. Okay, well, let's move right along. So the first agenda item on our miscellaneous calendar is meeting minutes from April 26th. I will move those and then I will take the rest of the miscellaneous agenda that is all the way up to the letter R. Oh, yes. All those, any edits or amendments, thoughts? Okay. So I move approval of the meeting minutes. Might want to. From April 26, 2022. All those in favor, Bernard,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
Mike.
I abstain, wasn't a member.
Okay, and the chair votes aye. Okay, now I will move the following consent agenda, approving the authorization to hire requests to backfill the following position in the police department. Police Department, Chief Emergency Telecom Dispatcher. Approving the authorization to hire request to backfill the Assistant Treasurer in the Finance Department. Approving the authorization to hire request to backfill the following position in the Legal Department, Senior Paralegal Secretary. Approving the authorization to hire request to backfill the following positions in the Library Department. Business Manager, Library, Assistant Director of Technology. Approving the authorization to hire requests to backfill the following positions in the Recreation Department, Supervisor of Recreational Building Operations, Recreation Leader, Environmental Ed, Equipment Repair and Maintenance Tech, accepting a grant from the Lauren Dunn Astley Memorial Fund for the Aware After School Youth Training Program in the amount of $2,000. Approving the following donations to the Brookline Asian American Family Network for the annual Asian American Essay Contest Awards Ceremony and an AAPI Heritage Month celebration that is being held on Wednesday, May 11th, which is tomorrow. Approving the proclamation for Children's Mental Health Awareness Week and Month. Approving the proclamation for National Public Works Week from May 15th to May 21st, 2022. Approving a contract with Cassidy Bro Forge Incorporated for the supply and installation of replicated doors and hardware at the historic masonry crypt tombs in the old burying ground in the amount of $49,067. Approving extra work order number 1 associated with a contract, repair and installation of chain link fencing. RAD Corp. doing business as RAD Sports in the amount of $23,570.50 for additional work required for fence repair due to damage that has occurred during snow response. Approving extra work order number 1 associated with a contract, Beacon Street and General Grounds Maintenance, Leahy Landscaping Incorporated, in the amount of $12,000 for additional hourly work to assist with landscaping maintenance. Approving extra work order number 1 associated with contracts, School Grounds Maintenance, Park Landscape Associates Incorporated, in the amount of $25,474 for costs associated with additional hourly work to assist with landscaping maintenance at Walnut Hills Cemetery and for emergency snow removal at Baker School and Old Lincoln School. Approving extra work order number 2 associated with a contract, upkeep of trees and related work, Northeastern Tree Service, in the amount of $101,880 for costs associated with additional forestry landscape services, tree removal, and replacement in Walnut Hills Cemetery and public parks and open spaces. Approving a temporary wine and malt beverage non-sales license to the Lars Anderson Auto Museum to be held on May 12th, 2022 for a nonprofit fundraiser from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. at 15 Newton Street. 500 people are expected to attend. Approving a temporary wine and malt beverage non-sales license to Art Barn Community Theater to be held on May 14th, 2022 for a fundraising dinner from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. at 16 Emerson Street. 100 people are expected to attend. Approving a temporary wine and malt beverage non-sales license to the Lars Anderson Auto Museum to be held on May 15th, 2022 for a corporate cocktail reception from 5:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. at 15 Newton Street. 75 people are expected to attend. And finally, approving a temporary all alcohol beverages non-sales license to the Lars Anderson Auto Museum to be held on May 24th, 2022 for a corporate dinner from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. at 15 Newton Street. Only 20 people are expected to attend. All those in favor? Bernard,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Thank you so much.
Mm.
Okay, and now to our regular agenda. Thank you so much for your patience. Colin O'Connell, Chief of Operations of our Fire Department.
Greetings all. Colin O'Connell, Chief of Operations, Brookline Fire Department, in place of Chief Sullivan, who couldn't make it tonight. I have a communication that he wrote, just going to read it to you. Yes. At the April 26, 2022 meeting of the Board of Selectmen, in expectation of the retirement of Captain Sean Fay, this body unanimously approved the fire department's request to promote 2 anticipated vacant officer positions internally. After the approval, the fire department administration reviewed the standings on the current civil service list and conducted interviews of the requisite eligible candidates for promotion. Tonight, I respectfully ask the select board to promote the following 2 individuals. The eligible members to be promoted are firefighter Andy Cavallo to lieutenant, Lieutenant Paul Canny to captain. These members have proven to be valuable assets to the public safety community. Firefighter Andy Carvalho joined the Brookline Fire Department in November 2014 after having been laid off from the Fall River Fire Department, where he served admirably from 2010 to 2014. He's a 2010 graduate of the Massachusetts Fire Academy in Stowe and has received firefighter 1 and 2 certificates, flammable gas firefighting school certificates, and hazmat operational level certificate training. He's a nationally registered EMT and has completed ICS 100, 200, 700, and 800. He has recently served for an extended time frame as a temporary lieutenant and comported himself with distinction. Lieutenant Paul Canny joined the Brookline Fire Department in November of 1999 and was promoted to the rank of lieutenant in March of 2012. Lieutenant Canny is a 1996 graduate of Brookline High, where he was a student athlete serving as chapter president of the Lambda Sigma National Honor Society. He holds a bachelor's degree in fire science from the Columbia Southern University He also holds numerous fire and emergency services certifications, including being a Massachusetts Fire Certified Emergency Medical Technician, Pro Board certifications as a firefighter level 1 and 2, fire officer 1, and fire instructor level 1. Lieutenant Kenny is also excellent senior officer, fire officer who brings over 2 decades of invaluable experience to the cadre of the fire captains. There is no past or current outstanding disciplinary issue with any of these candidates, and I am confident that each of these members will prove invaluable in their new positions. Sincerely, John F. Sullivan, Chief of the Brookline Fire Department.
Great, thank you very much for that synopsis. Any questions? Okay, then I will move approving the following promotions in the fire department as outlined by the chief in his memo. Firefighter Andy Carvalho, thank you, to lieutenant, and Lieutenant Paul M. Caney to captain. All those in favor? Bernard?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you so much.
And just an addendum, in the community room at 11 a.m., they've invited the entire board to come over. There'll be a small ceremony for them.
Is that tomorrow?
Thursday.
Oh, Thursday.
Thursday, the 11 a.m. the 12th.
Great, thank you so much. We'll make sure that someone
Great.
is there representing the board.
Have a good night.
Great. Okay. Great. So moving on, personnel benefits and compensation, a conversation with our town administrator, Mlk Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So at this time, I am recommending that the select board approve a 1.0% general increase in the salary and wage benefits the salary and wage schedules for all management and non-union employees of the town. And that would be retroactive to July 1st of 2021 or our current fiscal year 2022. And as you know, a collective bargaining agreement with the town's largest union, AFSCME, has been reached for a similar 1.0% increase in fiscal 22. The increase for AFSCME will be approved at the upcoming town meeting, as are all collective bargaining agreements. But no town meeting approval is required for non-union employees, and sufficient funding is available within the FY 2022 salary reserve account to meet this expense. Salary and wage increases for the next fiscal year, which begins on July 1st, will be taken up in June by the board. But there's no surprise that the AFSCME agreement calls for increases of 3% in fiscal 23 and 3% in fiscal 24, but we'll be taking those up next month. I'm also recommending for the board's consideration or approval, a modification of the vacation leave benefit for mid-management employees. We call it the MMTP plan. In 2015, the town reduced the vacation benefits for this group of employees in response to audit findings that highlighted the unfunded financial liability of accrued vacation leave. Among other actions taken to address that, vacation leave was reduced in this group from 4 weeks to 2 for any new mid-management employees hired after 2015. Over time, this reduction has proven to be unproductive. 2 weeks of vacation for this group of employees is not competitive when recruiting and retaining employees within the current labor market. In addition, the grandfathered implementation of this reduction has created unintended consequences in the fairness of our benefit packages for our this group of employees. So at this time, we recommend that the board adopt and authorize the increase to all non-union wage schedules by 1.0%, effective immediately and retroactive to July 1st of 2021, and to adjust the classification and pay plan for employees within the MMTP plan to receive 4 weeks of vacation, and that's becoming effective on July 1st of 2022.
So I think the first issue is fairly straightforward. We have the money and it's in line with an agreement recently reached with one of our biggest unions. Any thoughts or questions on that in particular before we talk about the vacation? Okay, so I will move the approval of authorizing an increase in wage and salary schedules for non-union employees. But just for the past fiscal year?
It's for fiscal year 2022.
Okay, for fiscal year 2022. All those in favor? Bernard,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Any comments about the vacation time? Mike?
I wonder, Mel, if you could tell us about the rollover, the rollover policy with vacation time?
Sure. I mentioned at the time that we implemented this reduction, we also implemented a limitation, a maximum on carryover of vacation at that time, and that has proved to be helpful.
Do you know how many hours?
Is Ann, can you promote Ann, please? I'll promote our HR director. She can help me with that.
While we're doing that, Miriam, did you have a
Yeah.
question or comment?
Just a comment. I want to say that I really, and we know that, you know how I feel about this, which is I think this is very important. We want our town employees to feel valued. And I think that the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that people need time off. They need breaks. They need time to recharge and recoup. And it actually makes them better at their job. And so I think we actually do ourselves a favor, not just in recruiting, but I think we actually get more productive, happy employees. And so really very, very pleased to see this change. I'm all behind it 100%.
Great. I see Ann.
Evening, everyone. Ann Braga, HR Director for the Town of Brookline. Thank you for your voices of support for our town employees, both in the election as well as the Public Service Recognition Week. As far as the rollover for accrued time for vacation, new employees as of 2013 are capped at 200, are capped at 6 weeks of time. And at that point in time, when they reach that amount, they don't accrue anymore until they get down below the cap.
Thank you.
I will also add to what Miriam said. So when my first job out of college was working for the Justice Department, and I only got 2 weeks of vacation a year. And moving from, Portland, Maine to Washington, DC, making not a lot of money. I could only afford to go home once, maybe twice a year. And I just didn't have enough vacation to do anything really other than 4th of July and Christmas. Like those were my 2 weeks. And I can tell you that it definitely contributed to some depression in my 20s because I really couldn't see friends and family. So I'm also in full support of this. I think people tend to hoard vacation time when they are used to not having very much. So if we can do this, hopefully people won't hoard it and they will actually take it on a regular basis and everyone will be happier and more productive as a result. Okay, so I will move approval of the changes to benefits and working conditions for positions on the mid-management professional technical pay plan. All those in favor, Bernard,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Thank you so much to our Director of HR and our Town Administrator for working on that issue.
Thank you very much.
Oh, goody. Select Board Committee assignments. I worked on this on my Friday night.
I'm so happy with this list now.
That's trouble. I can feel it.
I know.
No, I'm the one who had 7 before, so. thank
So
you.
what I did was I tried my hardest to, now that I have been doing this chair thing for a little while, I have a better grasp of what committees are still going on versus are just dormant and still on our list. So I tried to equalize the distribution of work. So I'm happy to run down the list and then we can talk about it. Anyone, seeing an assignment that they're uncomfortable with, any trades that they want to make before I read the list into the public record.
I'm very happy with the list.
Okay, so I'll just read it and stop me if you have any points of order.
You spread the pain.
Okay. We have quite a number of active committees. Thank you, sometimes town meeting. So Age Friendly Cities Committee, John Van Scoyac. Audit Committee, Bernard Green. Brookline Fiscal Advisory Committee. Oh, that's not really going on, but if anything comes up, John, you're our man.
They always make a comeback.
Yeah. CDBG Advisory Committee, Green. Commission on Disability, Miriam Ashkenazi. Council on Aging, John. CDICR Commission, Miriam. Electronic postings. Oh, sorry, that I didn't catch that one either. That's done, isn't it?
I think so.
Okay, so we'll move
You
on.
can tell I love this.
Indigenous Peoples Celebration Committee, John. Massport Citizens Advisory Committee. I will still do that one. It's only 4 times a year, but oh my God, it goes for 2 or 3 hours. And it's about noise and pollution. MLK Committee, Bernard Green. Pierce School Building, Bernard Green. Town School Partnership Committee, I will be representing along with Mike Salmon. Lower Boylston Study Committee until it is completely done, John Van Scoyac. Small Business Committee, Development Committee, Mike Salmon. Cannabis Mitigation Advisory Committee, Mike Salmon. Driscoll School Building Committee, Miriam. Housing Advisory Board, me. Surveillance Committee, Bernard. 9/11 Committee, Bernard. Ranked Choice Voting, Mike Salmon. Town Administrator Search, me. Babcock Street, Mike Salmon. CPA, me. BHA Collaboration, Mike Salmon. ARPA Review.
Sorry, give me
Yeah.
that one. Give me that one again, please.
Oh, that was the Brookline Housing Authority.
It's a new partnership or a new
Oh, sure. okay.
initiative
Yeah, yeah,
between
yeah.
the town and the
BHA. Yeah,
housing
yeah, yeah.
authority. yeah.
ARPA Review, Miriam and Mike.
I'll do the heavy lift on that, Mike, so, because you took a lot off my hands, so thank you.
All right. That's a deal.
Okay, any questions or comments?
Is Babcock Street still a live committee? Is it?
You and I will
that.
meet
Yeah.
and I'll tell you where we are in ranked choice voting and on Babcock.
Okay,
Yeah.
So the chart, we were a little in the weeds with the charge on Babcock. I think it's pretty much resolved. I'll chat with you about it and we still have to vote on the charge. as
Right.
a select board.
okay.
And it's important to coordinate with Kara Burton,
Sure.
especially now that we're talking about a comprehensive plan. But
Okay.
part of that, from what I recall, that was not supposed to impede any other
Yeah,
efforts
it's
going
meant
on. Yeah.
yeah, but you'll have a chance to look at the charge and make any edits because it hasn't been voted on. We had to deal with some legal complications with having someone from the Brookline Housing Authority on the committee and someone from BIC on the committee. That has been resolved. I'm pretty sure all of that's been resolved, but
Okay.
just now, like just a few weeks ago. So.
All right.
Great. Okay.
Good.
Bernard,
And this relates to the Babcock parking lot.
Right.
Right, okay, because there are other Babcock
Right,
issues around town. that-
Right.
Right.
this
Yeah,
is
there
just
was,
for the
there
public.
was.
This is
yeah, a
what
Babcock
uses
issue
for
with
that
trees.
parking lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
this was a warrant article
Yeah,
that
Yeah.
passed at town meeting.
right.
Just for the public's edification.
Yes.
And the warrant
Yes.
article itself said who should be on it, but then there was, again, some conflict of interest issues that we had to deal with legally in terms of who should be on it. So
Yeah.
we had to
Yeah,
resolve.
because at the end, hopefully there will be some sort of public bid process.
Mhm.
So we wanted to make sure that we were in compliance with procurement laws.
Yeah.
John?
Well, as became obvious during the reading of the list, actually, a couple of the committees to which my name is attached really aren't active. And there's at least one committee on this list, which I know I was kind of lobbied by somebody who's very important to the committee, along the lines of, gee, I hope you get to be the select board representative to that committee. And I said, we'll see how it turns out. But I do wonder if there is, I'm not saying we should change anything in terms of what we do tonight, but can we consider this to be, a topic to be revisited for possible reintroduction if there's second thoughts about maybe one or two of the assignments?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Which
Absolutely.
committee are you talking about? I'm curious.
Well, I was hoping to keep that confident. I mean, I feel awkward bringing it up because then people are going to look immediately who got assigned to it and say, oh, he's trying to get the assignment that so-and-so got.
I will say this, though.
Yeah.
Both select board members have to agree.
Oh, absolutely. No,
Okay.
I wouldn't do it under any other circumstances. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the sort of upside of what I'm suggesting is maybe there's somebody who would appreciate having one less committee assignment. I hope so. And, I can fill in for that person. And at the same time, maybe that's the same committee that, a couple people have said they would like to see me be the representative to. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk offline.
Yeah.
And if it's mutually agreeable,
Yeah.
then we will figure it out. Any other comments? I don't think we actually have to vote on this.
Okay.
So, but I wanted to be transparent and so that everyone understands all of the extra work that we do outside of these Tuesday meetings.
Thank you, Mike. Because when I was the freshman, I had the 7 committees.
Well, I can't, let's see.
7, yeah, you have the
7
now.
committees, right.
Yeah.
right, 7 committees, right.
Okay, moving.
It feels odd to be called a freshman, I will say.
Well, rookie.
Rookie, I like that even better. Intern? No, rookie, definitely.
So moving on to our next agenda item, welcome back our town clerk, Ben Kaufman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Always a pleasure to get to speak twice to the select board in one night. The question before the board is a fairly simple question that is aiming to solve a problem that hopefully will not occur. The registrars of voters have been made aware that there might be a recount request for one of the races from the May 3rd, 2022 annual town election. We're in the process of preparing for that recount should it come. The recount is going to have to occur between May 14th and May 23rd. And there already is one registrar who's going to be out of town in that time period, and potentially another registrar who's going to be unable to attend the recount, which would put the registrars not having a quorum for the recount. Fortunately, the legislature, in their wisdom, built in the Mass General laws a provision where, should there be a vacancy on the select board during a recount, on the board of registrars during the recount, the select board can appoint a temporary registrar who only serves for that period of time during the recount to allow us to have a quorum. So out of an abundance of caution and to make sure we're prepared for any scenario, the registrars of voters are requesting that you appoint a temporary registrar who can be utilized in the event that 2 of our registrars are unavailable during a recount in the coming weeks. The registrars of voters have recommended Michael Hecht, who is a registered voter in Brookline at 9 Park Vale. Michael is also a temporary employee in the town clerk's office who helps us around election season, recruiting our election workers. He also serves as a warden in Precinct 5. He is highly qualified. He has the support of all of the registrars who have all said that he would be a great fit and a great option as a temporary registrar.
Great. Miriam.
Ben, can you just enlighten me on what this person's role would be?
Certainly, in the event of a recount, the registrars are overseeing the count making sure it's done appropriately and according to the law, as well as resolving any disagreements or disputes among challenged ballots. So most of the work that's done by the registrars is during the recount. The tally team that is at the table will be looking at ballots and stating what they believe the vote was on that race. If the observer from one of the parties chooses to challenge that ballot, it then is brought to the registrars, who will review the ballot and determine whether it should be counted as called, counted a different way, or if for some reason it should not be counted in the vote at all.
Thank you.
Bernard?
Yeah, the town election is nonpartisan town election. So who would be the two parties in this process or in this situation?
Certainly. So the parties in terms of the registrars of voters is actually set by state law. The registrars must be evenly split between the two major parties in the state, which in this case is Democrat and Republican. We currently have 2 Democratic registrars and 2 Republican registrars. We have confirmation that both myself, who's a Democratic registrar, as well as Peggy McGuire, who is a Republican registrar, will be available for the event of the recount. So that is why the temporary registrar can be of either party. And Michael Heck was actually originally recommended by Peggy McGuire, the Republican registrar, even though he himself is a registered Democrat. So as long as you can have 2 Democrats and 1 Republican, but you could not have 3 Democrats and 1 Republican or 2 Democrats and no Republicans. In terms of the parties who are actually participating in the count, we have a counting team, which is usually made of town hall employees and other election workers who are doing the count. And then any candidate for the race in question is allowed to send observers who can challenge ballots and do that kind of work.
Thank you. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
It is, I will say, also open to the public, the recount itself. So we anticipate it to be in room 103, and you are welcome to stand in the back and observe.
John?
I just want to make a little historical note here, which is that I survived a recount once. So it is possible to survive a recount. My margin went from 1 to 2 after the recount. So, yeah.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Ben, for recruiting and offering up this name to us so that it was one less thing that we had to do ourselves. Oh, okay. Somebody, okay. Val Frias has her hand up. Let's take the comment. Maybe she's going to vouch for Mr. Hecht. Okay. Well, let's just give it a second. And I will. Okay, great. So I will move the appointment of an acting registrar of voters. All those in favor? Bernard?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
Mike? And the chair votes aye. Thank you so much, Ben, and best of luck to you and your staff on the recounts.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, next up is a discussion on electric vehicle municipal fleet. My former co-petitioner, Jesse Gray, along with Werner Lohi. Do they have a presentation?
Are they here? Oh, Jesse's here.
Werner's here.
Yes, they're
Jesse's here.
remote, I believe. Hi, Werner.
Hi, Warner. Congratulations. Oh, and Jesse, congratulations.
Thank you. And just coming from Bath here, did you just introduce me as your former co-petitioner, Heather?
Yes.
Fantastic. So this is, I guess, in the department of Let's Make a Plan on electric vehicles. Werner has been spearheading really important work. I will say 2 sentences of context for this, which is 2 really important things that we need to do right now on climate are that we need to stop burning stuff And we especially need to stop making new capital expenditures on equipment to burn stuff. It's as simple as that. If we buy a car in FY23, this upcoming fiscal year, that vehicle is likely to be operating in 2040, has a chance of still operating in 2040, when we have decided as a town that we want to have net zero emissions. And so we are putting ourselves at risk of having a stranded asset and of not meeting our climate goal if we purchase new infrastructure as part of our town government. So with that in mind, that is sort of the first thing when you're in a hole, is to stop digging. It's important that we transition the mindset. So even though the state still has an incentive system in place that tracks miles per gallon fuel efficiency of municipal fleets, that is no longer compatible with our climate goal. We need to stop burning stuff entirely. So we need full EVs whenever we can. And if I can share my screen here, I will, looks like I can. I will share a summary, very brief, of Warner's work in going through the budget and picking out all of the vehicles. And then the underlined and bolded ones are vehicles that we identified that could be purchased as electric vehicles potentially. And then Werner and I, mostly Werner, spoke with different department heads with the support of the town administrator, which was extremely important. And for the most part, these have been great conversations and we've made great progress. And so we have agreement from the DPW and we have agreement from the building department. And we've had some fantastic conversation with the incoming new chief of police, Chief Gonzalez, who has lined up a demo. And we have an upcoming conversation with the fire chief. So we're very optimistic about this, but one of the challenges is that there may be increased cost in some cases for the electric vehicles. For example, for the police, if they decided to get 6 electric vehicles, depending on the model, it would cost more. It depends on the model, how much more. And then also, we have not installed any infrastructure for charging the municipal fleet. And so we anticipate approximately $50,000 for installation of chargers over the course of the next year to support this electrification. So this is what we're working on. This is an update. I don't think we're asking for anything at this time other than your support, continued support in this process, and any help in identifying the funds so that we can make this a reality, even if that's not part of the actual budget proposal, which I don't think it needs to be. So that's all I have. And thanks again to the department heads and especially the town administrator for being so supportive of this mission. It is a different way of thinking about things. It requires change, and the staff has been fantastic about it.
Great. Thank you, Jesse. Mel would like to say something.
Well, I wanted to thank Jesse and Warner for their initiative. ZAB is becoming a very proactive organization, and I think we're all pleased that it has a new focus. The issue of electric vehicles is something that's changing fairly quickly. It was just 2 years ago that the town meeting passed a resolution that gave us a blueprint of how departments should look at vehicles and evaluate vehicles as they program replacement vehicles. And in those 2 years, I think that the notion that the town needs to act more aggressively in electrifying its fleet, I think is well accepted. we're supportive of it, but obviously we need to make it work. Departments, especially those in public safety, public works, have a duty to respond in many cases in emergencies, inclement weather, and other factors. So we have to be very careful. Just as Jesse said, these cars will be in place for a long time, and if they don't work, that's going to be a problem. So we have to be careful, and that's why I thought it was really important for Jesse and Werner together, or Werner in some cases, just to talk to the department heads, talk it through, listen to them, what their concerns are, constraints are, and talk to some of the experts who've been doing a lot of the research. And through that process, been very productive. And there's been several agreements where the departments electric vehicles would be acceptable. And I think that's great. And we're going to continue to work at that. There is a budget consequence. First of all, there's $50,000 that's being suggested for the charging infrastructure, and that is critical. And I would say that that's one of my top priorities. We are not going to be successful in transitioning to electric fleet without the infrastructure in place. So, and then there's additional funds whenever an electric vehicle was replacing a vehicle in the budget that was programmed for a gas or hybrid model. So we're still working those numbers out. It's late in the game, but we're going to try to put something together. So as Jesse said, tonight is not a night where we're prepared to talk numbers, but we will be putting together some ideas for the board's consideration.
Mike?
So first of all, I think you're absolutely right. Both Jesse and Werner and Mel in moving forward in this. But I do have just a couple of questions. One is when we talk about $50,000, any sense of how many charging stations? And then I have one other question.
Yes, but I'll ask Jesse to answer, or Warner to answer that. I believe I asked the same question yesterday. How many charging stations would that 50?
Right. That's a great question. Probably you could install somewhere between 10 and 25 level 2 chargers. It does depend on the electric supply that's available. It depends on where you want to put the chargers. Anytime you have to trench through asphalt or concrete, the cost goes up pretty quickly. So like town hall garage, conduit can go along the walls as long as there's enough electric supply. So that would be more, I think, in the range of a couple $1,000s per charger. But a single level 3 fast charger, which is the kind that could refill the entire battery of a vehicle in an hour or half an hour, could cost $50,000 all by itself. So there's a need for charging. We're going to have to be tactically smart about it, I think. And it really depends on not only some of the findings that we don't yet have, but some tactical decision making that will have to take place.
Okay, thank you. And the other question is something that I asked Jesse when we talked about this in a phone conversation earlier, I guess last week it was, and that is the potential for leasing vehicles as opposed to buying them. Because one of the advantages of leasing is that the leasing company can use the tax rebate or the tax credit that comes with the vehicle, something that the town can't do.
Yep, definitely looking into that.
Okay, good.
We're also looking into, I should say, other state and federal grants. Our department has been pretty aggressive in looking for grants, and I need to get a handle on that. Different departments have been working on different aspects, so I need to pull that together too, and that may be very helpful in trying to figure out how to go forward.
The one other caution that I would have from personal experience working with this in our own condominium, the condominium I live in, is that Eversource, if Eversource needs to provide additional power, that can take some months to arrange.
We are aware of that.
So a long time ago, in what seems like a past life, I was a manager at MassDOT, and I ran the highway fleet. And we were very successful at adopting hybrid technology. And I worked to get some of the first chargers installed on some of our properties. So if I can be of any assistance, I know some of the power companies are trying to give this technology away. But as Jesse alluded to, it's the installation that really kills you when it comes to the cost. You can actually get the chargers for pretty cheap, but then getting someone to install it is another story. So I'm happy to work with you on that. And there was a lot of resistance when I tried to introduce hybrid, especially the trucks, into our fleet. But by the end, those trucks were loved. And we used to have this thing where the new vehicles would go to the most senior supervisors and then, domino effect. And it became like a status symbol. If you had one of the hybrid Chevy trucks, they did not want to give them up. So just saying, don't knock it until you try it. Okay, so thank you so much for your hard work on this, working with town department heads and our town administrator so that we can all do the victory lap when this finally gets done. Great. Any
Thank
other
you
questions?
for your support.
Great. Okay, moving along to our next agenda items.
That's gotta be a typo, right? 6:30?
No.
We thought we were gonna be.
Well, see,
here
the,
at 6:30.
the problem when we post these agendas is
Yeah.
that if we run to,
Yeah, no, I'm just teasing.
yeah, so we post for a time where we know we're not going to make so that we're not left having to break for half an hour. Okay, so I've promised Clint Richmond that he can go first because he accidentally got double booked between us and the advisory committee for the same night to do his presentation on warrant article. Yeah, Devin will kind of help
Wait.
you with the setup.
Which warrant article?
The ban on artificial turf, I believe
We
that is,
discussed that last- we discussed that
24.
Last week.
oh, did you
He
present?
presented last week.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think I think we took up 23, which was the task force, but not warrant article 20.
You're right. We took
4.
up 23. You're right. And this week we're doing 24. My apologies.
No worries.
Okay, so shouldn't this be under number 11 warrant articles that we're hearing for the first time?
Yes,
Okay,
but he's double booked,
no, I got it.
so we're going to let him go first.
But in the agenda,
wait,
it's under
yes,
12.
It's backwards in
Yeah.
the agenda.
Yeah.
Right. You're right.
Yeah.
So we're not necessarily.
My agenda
voting
has it
tonight.
at
That's-
11.
that's the issue.
Last week we heard warrant article 23 formally and not 24.
So
it's
this is
backwards.
24 and not 23.
So it should
I know.
say,
It's under both.
No, my
No,
agenda
not
has
on
warrant
mine.
article 3 in
We
there.
clearly
Okay.
have different agendas.
Yeah.
I just downloaded this from the website, so presumably.
is
Sorry, I
yours-
just downloaded this from the website, so presumably it's in 12, but
There are 2 warrant
not a problem.
articles
Yeah.
on turf. One is to create a
Yeah.
task force
Yes.
and one is just ban it outright.
But they're backwards on
Okay.
the agenda, just so you
Okay.
know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we're talking about two different things. The issue is, as I see it, is that warrant article 24 will be brought to the board for the first time. We won't necessarily vote as opposed to
We could,
looking at it a second time and voting for it.
but we could vote because it says.
Yeah, we
possible
could,
vote,
but
Yeah.
you know,
Because we already had 23 also,
Yeah.
so there was a lot of discussion around 24.
Yeah,
I'm
this was a little bit of a mix up.
So
So let's have the presentation and then we can take the temperature of the board on how everybody wants to proceed.
Can't plug it in.
Right.
We need to just log into whatever your email is. Or if you emailed it to me in advance,
I just emailed it to you just this second.
that's fine.
Okay, while they're getting set up, how about a quick bio break
yeah.
or
okay,
refreshment?
What a great idea.
Okay.
let's Do that. And I have a quick question for you, Heather.
No, you're fine. We have this new two-factor authentication and yes, it gives me a little bit of trouble.
How's it going, Joe? Enjoying the meeting? So far. You think you'll get called on tonight? I bet you will. CDICR. You can develop a specialty on that one.
It's funny because for some reason, I was like, oh, I don't think anyone will have slides, so I didn't do this the way that I normally would have, just because like there had been nothing about this meeting, no peeps, no nothing.
In 3, 2, 1.
Okay, thank you and welcome back. Nothing to see, nothing to see at all here. Clint Richmond, thank you so much for making yourself available, and apologies that we double booked you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is, oh, I guess let me take off my name is Clint Richmond, Town Meeting Member Precinct 6, Chair of the Green Caucus, and in fact, speaking for the Green Caucus in effect this evening, since the Green Caucus recently endorsed this warrant article. My co-petitioners are Claire Stanford, a retired physician and former advisory committee member and town meeting member from 5. Susan Helms Daly from Precinct 1, who works as an environmental professional, and Andy Fisher, an attorney who's in a butter in 13, or I think they're still in 13, which is Driscoll a butter. And some of us were involved in the earlier town meeting decision on this subject previously with Cypress Field. So here's a summary of the bylaw. That Brookline, I just want to correct one thing. It's not a ban. This is a 3-year moratorium on artificial turf on town-owned property for the next 3 years, except to maintain or replace existing artificial turf fields. So that would allow Skyline to proceed. As well, and then it's called out later as well. But and then starting at the end of that moratorium, in effect on June 1st, 2025, new artificial turf fields must be free of organic fluorine, which includes PFAS, a group of chemicals which you're probably reading more and more about, that are synthetic petrochemicals that are extremely persistent and in some cases toxic. Then the latest motion divided that up and said that existing fields such as Sewell, and again Skyline, wouldn't have to comply with this until 2030. So the intent is to allow sufficient time for safe alternatives to be developed without unduly burdening our athletes. I think we know the pros of turf. For us, it's a question that the cons far outweigh the pros of turf, and that we are proponents of traditional natural materials that are generally agreed upon as safe and non-toxic. So, because it's grass, it allows for more uses for things like picnics or dog walking or so forth, because dogs are not allowed on plastic playing fields. The cons, as I mentioned already, alluded to, are PFAS, a large class of 12,000 chemicals. But there's lots of other chemicals in turf. And when we made the decision on Cypress back in 2000, I think it was spring of 2019, we didn't even know that PFAS was part of turf. So this is new information that had not been considered during the Driscoll process. And but as I said, it just is it's I guess in a way the most alarming of the possible chemicals that we know about in turf. The other is that because this is a product, not a habitat or nature, you have to remove the plastic playing field every 10 years. So for Downs, which is a full-size field, this is about 115 tons. At Driscoll, it's a much smaller field, so it'll be less. It's about 50 tons per acre. Another of the disadvantages is the high heat that is inherent to the blades, separate from the infill. And these can be roughly 30 degrees centigrade higher than grass, and hotter also than asphalt. And again, just the blades. The infill is not really cooling, it just doesn't add the same mass. And then there are climate impacts. Since we discussed Cypress, the town has passed a climate emergency resolution. So this is consistent with that we're going to avoid petroleum-based inputs, the loss of sequestration that we get from grass, and we've recently been reading, a continuous outgassing from plastic of methane and ethylene, which are very potent greenhouse gases. And again, I think there's the loss of habitat. So we currently have 4 artificial turf playing fields. 2 are full size. Together, they represent 5.6 acres of land. So we haven't actually offset that loss of green space. It's still part of our parks. It's still recreation space, but we're losing green space every time we install artificial turf. A few fun facts about PFAS. They're highly persistent, often called the forever chemicals. They are often bioaccumulative, meaning they build up in the body or in other animals. Again, your mileage may vary with your species. There are more than 10,000 of them. There's no known safe exposure level. It's not, because it's persistent, it's not broken down by any natural processes. Some of the, these are can be large molecules. Some of the non-fluorinated portions can be separated, but you'll always be left with this fluorine carbon core, which is so problematic. And many organizations, such as our own state entity called the Toxic Use Reduction Institute at UMass Lowell, is calling for them to be regulated as a class. And I was saying anything that meets the definition of PFAS should be regulated as one. So it doesn't matter, some may be worse than others. We're still going to regulate them and try to avoid them and substitute for them. Then for some PFAS, not all, there's too many to study, but for some of the worst ones that we've noticed, there are serious health effects as documented in this bullet point. I'm going to skip it. And for some of those, again, PFAS that have been identified as being toxic to humans, there are drinking water limits that are pretty strict. These are 20 parts per trillion. There are other chemicals that are regulated at the parts per trillion level, such as PCBs and dioxin, and I think people are sort of familiar with those and their hazards. So what I'm trying to say is it's kind of a chemical equivalency when you're talking about what's kind of what's considered a safe level of exposure. This is just in drinking water. Obviously, we're getting exposed from other things. We can get from fish, or in the case of turf, the microplastics that come from the blades when they're from wear. You could be ingesting those, and you'll be ingesting PFAS that way, or inhaling it into your lungs. We know through testing, not from the industry, that it's been this doesn't really reveal the chemicals that are in their products, has been found in artificial turf starting in November of 2019, so it was after Cypress, and it's being phased out where possible. And here's showing the already extent contamination from PFAS in the state of Massachusetts, and you can see here in eastern Massachusetts, we're highly exposed. Could be coming from multiple sources. Things like firefighting foam are popular, but others are industrial or from automobile and car usage, and there's just consumer products. There's a lot of different exposure routes, but it's already at kind of a crisis level when you look at this. And this is contaminated drinking water that the DEP has said you should not be drinking the water in these towns where it's red. Here's a news article about this, again, from the Globe. They've been writing about it quite frequently. That one's from just a month ago. Here's one about why it's so important to be protecting school grounds from artificial turf, and that it's part of the exposure to the most vulnerable, or some of the most vulnerable members of our population, which are school children. Because of their developing, you want to be exposing them to less chemicals than you would say to adults, because their body weights are low. But so here's something about reducing toxic chemicals in schools. And for example, the school committee adopted a resolution in support of a state law about use of pesticides on school grounds. So there's a lot of concern correctly around school children. But if this is part of the playground and there's no other playground at Driscoll, then you have to play on the one that's plastic that has all these chemicals, including PFAS. So what the goal of this, or the philosophy behind this, the approach behind this warrant article, is what's called the precautionary principles. We'll never know all the information that we might want to or need to for scientific certainty around these 12,000 chemicals, but that lack of certainty should not be used as a reason for postponing cost-effective measures to prevent environmental degradation, or in this case, exposure to humans. Some of the health and safety issues about heat, I guess we didn't mention heat island before, but these increased temperatures can lead to heat-related illnesses and dehydration just for the users, but also it creates a heat island during the day so that you won't want to be on this field. And there are guidelines that say don't play on fields above certain temperatures. So this is robbing the neighborhood, in the case of Driscoll, of this formerly grassy cooling area, and now replacing it with a hot plastic one, especially in the summer. I mentioned microplastics. I'm going to skip over the goalies. The other precedents, Sharon, Mass has a 3-year moratorium. Concord, Mass just extended their moratorium to 2027. Oak Bluffs was considering a ban. I'm not sure they are any now. Nantucket is pausing their large artificial turf field because of water quality issues. And we should too, because, as a Brookline is part of the Charles River watershed. So any of these microplastics sort of things that would be coming off the field and the chemical leaching and anything that might be volatilizing any of the atmosphere will be cycled through our local area. And as I've said, the committee will, if warrant Article 23 passes, will have a tough time, I think, conducting analysis because there's so little information about these products. And anyway, here are the current supporters of warrant Article 24. The Green Caucus, the Solid Waste Advisory Committee over Solid Waste Concerns sent you a letter earlier this year about this warrant article, but it earlier stated their opposition to Driscoll back last fall. The Advisory Council on Public Health, again, elevating that health voice. The Green Space Alliance, which are the Friends of Parks, the Massachusetts Sierra Club, the First Parish Climate Justice Committee. So what we want are safe, healthy playing fields for our children and our environment, and avoid PFAS and chemicals, climate friendly. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know Miriam has a question. Mike has alerted me that he also has a question. Let's start with Miriam.
Mine's not really a question.
Okay.
So I just have some counterpoints. And I'll be frank. We've had a lot of back and forth. You guys came to the Driscoll School Building Committee. We had several meetings about this. And warrant Article 24 in its current iteration only impacts Driscoll's pending field. So I am speaking to that because I'm on that building committee. And the first thing I'll say is I'm going to directly counter some of the points brought up in the PowerPoint. I will promise, keep it brief. A loss of green space. We're talking about play space for kids. And in fact, if we do sod or turf or sod or grass, that will significantly reduce the availability of play space for kids. And memo was just sent around to all the select board members, and we'll be sharing that with town meeting members as well. The existing Driscoll field condition was a natural grass field that deteriorated to unsafe conditions and was unusable during and after weather events. I'll just remind everybody that we live in New England. So that's pretty much every other day. So if we're talking about usable green space, then we want to be talking about artificial turf. Second, in terms of PFAS, the company that we have contracted with actually provided the material breakdown for the product to be tested by an independent third-party lab. And that lab showed the product does not contain PFAS chemicals currently listed as part of California's Proposition 65 regulations. So I think that's a very, very important piece of information. And in the memo, there is a link to the independent lab's testing, so you can look at the SDS sheet yourself. The other really important part, I think, is that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts just produced an 88-page report on PFAS, because I agree, PFAS is something we need to be thoughtful and careful about. But in that 88-page report, artificial turf was not mentioned one single time. So I think we need to focus on what we really need to worry about, which is where PFAS is infiltrating our water supply. And I would say, finally, the existing artificial turf fields in Brookline have never been once closed due to heat. And I really think that's important. And we are talking about coconut infill, which doesn't have the same level of problems with heat islands. So that's where I'm going to put, and I'm going to put it out there. Please read the memo. It's like 4 pages. The other thing the memo really outlines, and I think is really important, which hasn't been brought up here, is there was a robust public process. All the dates of the public meeting and how they were
Advertised.
Thank you, advertised. And we actually have the list of all the people who showed up, which I can provide if people want it. And this really runs roughshod over that public process, which for me, frankly, is a very important issue that we have to be mindful of. So I don't think we can just dismiss that. especially in light of all of the other points I made. So now I will stop talking. And also, last point, I think that this is why warrant article 23 gives us an opportunity to have a thoughtful approach. But this moratorium, again, I think it's a jackhammer when we need in a little
Scalpel.
Thank you.
Mike Salmon.
So there's a report entitled PFAS in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, final report of the PFAS Interagency Task Force. And as Miriam said, if you do a search there or you read it word by word, PFAS is mentioned extensively because that's what the report is about. It does not say the word grass or turf in its entirety. It's obviously not in the minds of these people who were doing a report primarily focused on the water supply. So I would ask you, you made a presentation here that leaned pretty heavily on PFAS. There are other things that you can and did lean on, for example, the need to recycle the product. But I would ask you to stop using PFAS as one of the reasons for passing this article based on what we see from the state and what we see from the manufacturer.
Clint, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you. First, that report from the lab that Miriam shared, I've seen, and it's measuring about a couple dozen chemicals. And we've already stated, and we know that there's 12,000 or at least thousands. They're inventing new ones all the time, actually. So that's why in this warrant article, it's very carefully in consultation with scientists, says that we need to look at the total organic fluorine because that will capture all fluorine or all organofluorine in the product. So that's like sort of the first layer, and that's to the extent that the manufacturers are typically providing their data. So that is inadequate and would not qualify under warrant article 24 as being a PFAS-free product. In Portsmouth, New Hampshire, they put out an RFP for PFAS-free product. They installed something, and then they did that same kind of test, and they discovered the fluoropolymers that are not tested by that test, 537, and are now, I don't know where they've ended up, but it was a mess because, as you can imagine, they promised the city of Portsmouth that there would be no PFAS in it, and they were misled. And the manufacturer says, oh yes, there are fluoropolymers, and sorry, and those are equally serious and persistent. So, and I can tell you finally about the task force, which I was an advisor to, actually. We had it was a fairly compressed process, and it was done to help guide the state in terms of coming up with a broad range of regulation and legislation. And it's not, so it's only sort of the first phase. I don't think that I would agree that turf was not kind of in their sights, but that doesn't absolve turf from its PFAS problems. And TURI, which is a state agency, has a whole website devoted to PFAS and turf, and has participated in seminars on PFAS and turf, so that it's something that communities are grappling with because of that water quality problem that I mentioned. So at this point, I don't think we want to be saying to our community and to our children that, well, we installed this knowing that it had PFAS in it, and it's persistent. We know it's persistent forever, and that it's this huge solid waste problem, and you're going to have to play on it. So I just don't really think that's a good, is a proper way to act as reflecting our community values.
I'm going to quote from this, read from this email, which is from Jen Carlson, who is the project manager for Left Field, which is the third-party project manager for Driscoll. Good morning. We know that PFAS chemicals seem to be at the heart of the turf discussion in town. Attached is information from the turf manufacturer about the chemical makeup of the product specified on the Driscoll project. They have also included a letter with lab results stating that their products do not include PFAS, and it doesn't say they don't include PFAS of a certain group. It says they don't include PFAS.
Well, as
I'm,
defined
I'm,
by the
it's,
results of that test.
I'm really at a loss for, it's as clear as I think it can be.
So we're not going to get into a heated discussion. We're going to play a little volleyball back and forth. John?
Yeah, thanks to all who have commented so far. Couple of things I just want to stipulate. I'm not interested in telling the Driscoll School community that they can or cannot have, either a grass surface or a turf surface. I do think the Driscoll School community should decide that for themselves. What I don't think is that this has been thoroughly vetted with the Driscoll School community. And I know, and I certainly respect the presentation by my colleague Miriam, but I have had lots of experience with processes in Brookline that involve committees that are assigned to a certain area of research and of planning. And those committees do all of the things that are required to check in with the community, test the ideas that are in front of them with the community, survey the community. But guess what? At the end of the day, it's quite possible that there are still a lot of people who haven't been heard from. There's still a lot of work to be done to figure out where the community stands on this rather important issue of, are they going to have a grass field or are they going to have an artificial turf field? It would be a little bit surprising in light of a park and rec master plan that was done a couple of years ago that included a survey of the people of Brookline on the question of artificial turf versus natural grass. In view of that survey, which found that a significant majority said that they would prefer natural grass. So what makes Driscoll exceptional? I'm not sure. Maybe we haven't really figured out where the parents of Driscoll stand. If they stand, and the kids too, let's, let the kids weigh in. We've heard from a fair number of young people in recent weeks and months who are part of the growing movement of people who are concerned about the presence of chemicals in the environment, the threat to climate, from the way that we have put petroleum products into the environment. This is all part and parcel of that. I should think there's some young people who are a little bit concerned about having these kinds of products used in place of natural grass. So have we really found out how Driscoll feels? I'm not so sure. If it turns out they resoundingly want artificial, let them go with artificial. I feel sorry for them because I think it's the wrong decision to make. And I'm going to quote just one item because it gets to this question of how do we know whether there's PFAS in these materials? Can you entirely rely on the word of the manufacturer? People have been in touch with me this week saying that the testing that was done and that has been cited in the case of these materials by Left Field is not of the level that would be required to actually detect PFAS in the materials. And I'm going to just quickly cite an article in the Boston Globe, October of 2019, by a very distinguished reporter of theirs, David Abel, Toxic Chemicals Found in Blades of Artificial Turf, complete with a photograph of some parents from Medway staring at a removed pile of rolls and rolls and rolls of artificial turf from a field in Franklin, abandoned, decomposing, and the public health officials have tested the material and they have found benzene, cadmium, other known carcinogens. And for the first time, a new series of tests has found that the blades and their plastic backing may also contain toxic chemicals. And then it goes on to specifically say elevated levels of per and polyfluoroalkyl chemicals known as PFAS, which have been linked to kidney cancer, low infant birth weights, and a range of diseases. So if I were a Driscoll parent, I'd be advocating for natural grass, but I'll leave it to the Driscoll community to figure this one out. I just don't think this has been thoroughly vetted by that community at this point.
Any other select board members before I respond to what John just said?
I would like to, but I won't.
Okay.
Because I think other
Let
people
me
have
just
more
try to cut to the
useful-
quick. As a member of the select board, and especially a member who was on the Driscoll School Building Committee before Miriam so graciously took over because I just didn't have it in me to continue. Waking up at 7 a.m. is just not my thing. To pick and choose which public processes we stand behind, I think is really difficult for me to swallow, John. You say that you don't know whether or not the school community was really consulted and had their voice heard. Miriam can rattle off all of the dates of all of those public meetings. And we get into dangerous territory if we start to say, well, I don't know. I mean, I got an email this week saying from an 80-year-old resident that she didn't even know anything about the election that was held last Tuesday. Should we do that process over? I mean, there are tons of people who come out after things are decided where they're like, I didn't know. I was never asked. You didn't put anything in the mail. You didn't text me. Do we do those processes over? Like what's the barometer now for when we have enough people to comment?
Good questions. And I don't claim to know the answer as to what would happen if we did go back and do a more careful sampling of opinion from that community. I can only cite that when this came up where Cypress Field was concerned, the neighbors were overwhelmingly in favor of natural grass. I know neighbors of Driscoll who are Driscoll school parents who are adamantly in favor of natural grass, and in fact are talking to their neighbors even as we speak, but haven't been part of that process. And so I don't want to go into all the details, but I have some personal experience with processes that went off the rails and misjudged where the public is. And I'm not saying that's happened here, but I think we need to do a little bit more time to do a little bit more vetting of this in the Driscoll community.
Well, time is money, and this is a construction project. So if we do hit the pause button, then we better be prepared to come up with a couple $2 million, which we can't go back to the state because we've already played that card. So as a fiscal agent for the town, I was co-chair of the Green Caucus with Clint. Really enjoyed working with him, but I have to do what I think is right for this particular project. I would be in full support of this warrant article if it was not written to target Driscoll School. I will leave it right there. It is a public hearing. I see a couple of hands up. So Devin, will you please call on members of the public who wish to speak?
Mary Sabulsi, you've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and your 3 minutes will begin. We will just need you to unmute.
Hi, my name is Dr. Mary Sabulsi. I am a medical doctor and I have a master's in public health. I spent a great deal of my career working at the State Department of Public Health. I have to say that an earlier commentator, Jesse Gray, said something that I thought was very pertinent when he said, when you know you're in a hole, you need to stop digging. I have talked to a number of people and town meeting members in the Driscoll school area, and someone asked me what I thought the consensus was, and I said, honestly, I cannot tell you. I said, because I've heard everything all over the place. Now, one of the issues, I think, is who does the field serve? Is the field, as Helen Charlupsky said at the meeting on Friday, a school field meant for school children and not to be used by people with dogs or people who live in the surrounding community? Or is it a field, that's for use by school children and for other people that live in the surrounding community? I mean, I do think that is a big question. I appreciate what both Heather and Miriam said about, having gone through this public process and feeling like they did a good job, which I think they did their very best to do. And I don't deny that, but, and I think that the situation at Driscoll is difficult. And honestly, I said to a town meeting member from that area who is a parent of a second grade Driscoll student last night, I don't know, maybe I would let it go because it seems to be so inflammatory. But then I got off the phone and I started writing, which is something I do a lot of the times when I want to clarify my thoughts. And I realized that if I had children in that area, I would not let them play on that turf. The turf is toxic. The results from the manufacturer are flawed. The results do not say it's PFAS free. The results say that it is free of certain PFASs that are blocked by California Prop 65. It does not in anywhere in that report claim that this is PFAS free turf. I actually contacted the manufacturer and asked for a sample so we could test for a total organofluorine level.
You have 30 seconds.
Of course, we're unwilling to provide that. With respect to the state report, I don't think that report, I think the focus of that 88 pages is PFAS should be banned as a class. Okay, if you're banning the chemical as a class, you don't need to single out individual instances of that class. They're saying no more PFAS, period. I think so. I think this is a tough question. I think that there's a lot of concern, and I don't think 3 months is going to satisfy anyone in terms of looking into these issues. Thank you very much. And I do appreciate that for everyone, this has been a very difficult process. Thank you.
The next person signed up for comment is Andrew Fisher. You've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and your 3 minutes will begin.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak and the opportunity. I don't think I need to repeat what Dr. Sabolsi said, but I do want to comment something about process. When an 87-year-old lady says, "I didn't know about the election," that's one anecdotal instance. When residents who abut the school, when town meeting members, when people involved in the PTA all don't know that things have happened. I looked to Select Board Member Van Scoyac and say, there comes a time when you look reasonably and inquire. If one person didn't know, well, shame on him. When two people didn't know, maybe I should start thinking about it. But when a number of people who are all actively involved in town issues don't know, well, maybe there's something wrong with the process. I'll leave that at that. But I would say that with respect to the cost, if the science is right, then the cost of doing this will be a lot more than the cost of the change order. It's not good practice. What do they say? Measure twice before you cut, aim before you shoot, and figure out what the dangers are before you jump in the pool. And we're ready to jump in, and we have plenty of warnings what the dangers are, and we're not heeding those warnings. Thank you for letting me speak. And thank you for considering what I have to say.
At this time, there are 11 attendees and no one has used the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
So at this time, I will close the public hearing, but any other select board members want to make comments? Bernard?
Yeah, let me try to make a couple comments. Someone said that there's a survey, I think John, I'm sorry, of people who were asked whether they would like natural grass or turf. Well, of course, everyone's going to say natural gas until you start balancing what the costs of that are. So I think that, we have to be careful about, how we sort of present the issue, because until people understand, the costs and benefits of the various options, what they say they want in the first instance is probably not a very good sign of, where they would end up. The way I see this is kind of frustrating. We're dealing with dueling experts. Your experts say this, my experts say that. And the select board and executive body is really not very well prepared or set up to do the research and background investigation for legislation like this. So I just say that to say that, I'm not, I think, this is going to be resolved at town meeting, not here at the select board. Although, we should, listen to and digest the dueling experts' opinions on this. But they are dueling experts, and, we're sort of in a bad position to figure out which expert is the best expert. So, just a comment.
Thank you, Bernard. Any other comments? John?
Just a quick one. Could we clarify what the cost differential is? Because I heard a number mentioned, which doesn't match up with what I'm looking at from left field, the consultants. who
Yeah, I think what Heather was referring to is that eventually that means all the turf has to be replaced. All the artificial turf has to be replaced. That's a very
Okay.
high cost, yeah.
But there is
the-
not a $2 million.
It's not a $2
differential
million
at
cost
Driscoll.
differential for the Driscoll
Yeah.
project.
Yeah.
It's not, no.
Yeah.
But I will say costs are escalating. Inflation is pretty rampant right now. For each day that project or that particular item is on hold, the costs will continue to escalate.
Just because I've raised the question, I'd just like to cite the number that's in the left
Right,
field
we-
analysis,
yeah.
which is $10,000.
Plus the 15% markup. Plus the cost, if you keep reading, Aaron Gallantine's memo is a little further down, plus the several $100,000 increased cost for maintenance over 10 years.
Well, maintenance, 10-year maintenance costs $265 for grass sod, $181 for synthetic turf. That's in the memo. That's not several $100,000.
Okay. Mike?
Yeah, honestly, I don't think cost is the point. And I say that having been a member of the advisory committee, the town finance committee. If I believed that there was a serious risk, or a risk, never mind a serious risk, a risk of exposure to toxic chemicals to children, I would say we can't have that. I spent a long time in the industrial textiles and chemicals industry, and I have familiarity with all sorts of truly toxic products. And I know that you have to evaluate the level of risk and the level of exposure. And it does not, if the manufacturer is correct and there's, being straightforward here, and there is no PFAS in these products, then that risk is non-existent. But even if there are some residual amounts of fluorinated chemicals in there, the level of exposure, level of a risk does not suggest to me that we have anything like a serious health risk here.
Miriam?
I'm going to keep it super short. Mary said, if I had a child, I wouldn't let them play on this field. So I think it's important to say, I have an MD, I have an MPH, and I have a child who is 15 years old, who plays every day at Downs, Monday through Friday. And if I had to trade him not being able to access that physical activity for 2 hours, Monday through Friday, I wouldn't do it, right? I'm more than comfortable with him going to Downs every day. I'm thankful, frankly, that when it's raining out, he can go to Downs. He needs that. And so I think this is the checks and balances we're talking about. This is the risk benefit evaluation. And I just have one caution for you, Clint, take it or leave it, but you cite a study that you imply causality with PFAS and leukemia. I haven't read the study. I'd love it if you could send it to me, but please be very careful not to imply causality if that study doesn't prove causality, because that's very, very hard to prove. Just semantics, but a very important semantic. So I think it was your like 4th or 5th slide. Just please send me that. I'd love to read it. Thank you. That's it.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they say link in the study.
Link is not
No, I understand.
very important.
I
So
understand. I didn't,
yeah.
Clint, do you have any final words?
Yeah, I want to underline what John Van Scoyoc said about the left field study that when I read it, I haven't been able to locate it again, but it was the change order would either save money or cost the same in terms of the overall project. Maintenance costs are future costs, and who knows what they'll be. So
Fair.
And the other is that the difference between you sending your child out, which I did too, because my son played lacrosse and soccer, is that you have the option of signing up. You don't have to play on turf. But at the school grounds, there's no grass for playing on the playing field, which was confirmed on Friday at our meeting with the Fiscal Building Committee, and that the parents there don't have a choice. So while you may be comfortable, other parents may not, because different parents have different levels of risk. But the parents shouldn't have to have a master's in public health or be an MD to figure out if it's safe to play on their playing field, for a playground every day, and their gym classes. And so I just think it's really unfair at a playground to force kids to be exposed. And our own advisory council on public health said, vote yes on warrant article 24. So you're basically saying you're dismissing that if you vote no.
Thank you.
Please don't do that. I'm not dismissing them. okay?
Miriam.
I'm making an independent decision.
So we're gonna move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
When we start to consider the warrant articles that we've heard and we start to vote, we may revisit this. But these two gentlemen have been waiting very patiently. Is Melissa back from AC yet? Because technically we have compensating balances, but it'll be real quick. Real quick. Hi, Melissa.
Hello. So Article 3, we had not put on the calendar yet. This is an annual article that we file that essentially gives authorization to the treasurer collector to allow him to have compensating balance agreements with banks, which essentially allows for the town to put our money in non-interest bearing accounts in exchange for waiving of certain bank services. So the recommendation under this article is favorable action.
Great. Any questions about this? This one is pretty perfunctory.
Thank goodness.
Yes.
I
Oh,
like
and this
that
is a
word.
public hearing. So Devin, anyone signed up to speak on compensating balances?
At this time, there are 11 attendees and no one has used the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
Great. I will close the public hearing on compensating balances. Any discussion from select board before I move the language to be voted, which would be favorable action? No? Okay. I will move favorable action on warrant article 3, which is compensating balances. All those in favor, Bernard,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Great. We will have a update on warrant article 11, retiree COLA increase. I know John is really looking forward to this. And okay, Frank and Gary, thank you so much for your patience.
We have plenty of patience. And thank you for having us again. I remember the last time we visited, we were virtual and it was past my bedtime when we had the opportunity to speak. But let me just, just a brief introduction in terms of why we're here. So Article 11, we're seeking to raise the COLA base from the 13,000, which we did 10 years ago, to 15,000. And what that means in terms of real dollars, it means that instead of a $390 increase to the retirees' annual payment, it will go to $450, because by law, we are limited to an increase of 3%. We cannot do more than 3%. And the reason why the board considered this issue is that when Social Security came out with its increase earlier this year of a 5.9% increase, and if you look at that 5.9% increase on an average $20,000 Social Security payment, annual payment, that amounts to is almost $12,000 a year. And so we compared that to the $390 that our retirees receive. And we thought that if there was, and as the chairperson indicated, we are certainly in the era of rampant inflation. And the board not only has the responsibility to make sure that we are fiscally responsible, but also to consider the retirees that have retired from service in the town. So that's why we are looking to increase the base from the 13 to the 15. We have provided the board with, there was some questions that were asked of us, and we have provided the board with a sheet of answers. I hope you've had the opportunity to look at that sheet, and we are obviously here to continue where we left off. And if there are any questions, we're happy to answer. I'd just also like to introduce Mr. Zika, who has been with the retirement board for now 20 years. And we in the town of Brookline are very fortunate to have Frank with us, because there's nobody in the state that knows more about public retirements than Mr. Zika. So we are very, very lucky. So I'll turn it over, and Frank knows the numbers better than me as well.
Thank you. We've responded to, I think, mostly all the questions that have been asked. This morning, we had a board meeting where we adopted the 1/1/2022 actuarial valuation with all positive results, that the retirement system is, as of 1/1/2022, on an actuarial basis, 68% funded, to be fully funded in the year 2030, fiscal year 2030. Of the 104 Massachusetts public pension systems, only 12 have an assumed rate of return of less than 7%. Brookline makes it 13. We are at 6.9%. Over the next 8 years, we've lowered our assumed rate of return. And there are 33 out of the 104 retirement systems that are on pace to be fully funded in 2030. And Brookline is one of those. Brookline, over the years, has been very conservative in their approach, worked well with the town, and we look forward to working with you. And I think, speaking for the board, not myself, that it was a fairness issue, that the retirees deserve an increase in their COLA base, where a lot of neighboring communities are in the $15,000, $16,000, or $17,000 base. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. The valuation as of 12/31, Mr. Van Scoyoc has asked a number of questions, which I tried to respond to, and I think they're all on point. He did ask me a question today that I said I would give him an answer tonight, as what was the value of the pension fund yesterday at the close of business? I wish it was that easy to answer, but I will do the best I can. As of March of this year, strike that, March of 2020, which was in the midst of the pandemic, the stock market, the Dow was down 30%. The PRIT fund, which we were invested in, was only down 9%. We ended the year up 12% in 2020. As of March 31st this year, the Dow was down about 11%. The pension fund is only down 2%. As of the close of business today, I believe the stock market is down, the averages, the Dow is roughly 13%. The State Investment Trust Fund, which is where most of our monies are invested, they report out on the 20th of this month. for the close of business in April. But my best guess is that year to date, the fund is down approximately 6 to 7%. In the valuation that was presented to you, to the town administrator today, which I believe he shared with you, is that the 2030 funding schedule in 2029, there's a payment of roughly $50 million in 2029, and it drops off to 20 million in 2030. The previous schedule had over a $50 million increase, so the schedule is shortening, and we use asset smoothing, and right now we have approximately $58 million. We use a 5-year asset smoothing, so the past couple of years' returns, we only acknowledge 20% gains each year or 20% losses. So it's a smoother schedule, so you don't get appropriations that are like this. It's balanced, it has worked, and we're less than 100 months to fully funded. So when I first started in this business 37 years ago, fully funded was just a thought, but we're getting there and we're getting real close.
Great, thank you very much. I know there are going to be some questions. I see Bernard with his hand up.
Yeah, I'm just curious, is it typical for pension plans, state pension plans to assess or calculate the cost of living increase on a base as opposed to the full pension amount? I know I have a pension from Tennessee, and it's not calculated on a base, and I don't believe that Social Security is either.
Well, the
Not
legislature,
suggesting we change, I'm just saying, you know. it's-
the legislature in its, I say
Stingy
with
wisdom.
tongue-in-cheek wisdom, decided that there would be a base. The base used to be $12,000.
6 years. When I first started, it was 6 a long time ago.
And I'm older than you. So we have no choice. I mean, that's the base
No, I
we
wasn't
have to work with.
suggesting
Is it usually, I know that, you know, since I work in the field as a labor arbitrator, some states don't have a base. They just will come up with a cost of living adjustment. And also other states, employees also contribute to Social Security. Our retirees, because of Massachusetts law, don't receive Social Security benefits as a result of their employment with the town. They may receive it because of their, you know, another job, but the pension they receive from Brookline is their primary pension.
And they looked at it as a fairness issue that the rich wouldn't get richer, that the people that need it most, the low paid ones would get the same as the higher paid retirees. I had a 98-year-old retiree come in yesterday and asked about this warrant article, and he retired in 1957. He's the longest serving retiree in Massachusetts.
Did you ask if he voted?
No, I did not.
Yeah, I just find it interesting that, you know, liberal Massachusetts seems to be far behind a lot of states, including sort of skinflint states like Tennessee, where I worked.
Well, I can tell you that the Massachusetts public pension systems are heavily regulated and one of the best funded in the country. So our unfunded liabilities are going down, and I think that's part of the process in controlling future expenditures.
John?
So I want to thank these two gentlemen, and I want to say that they are representative of a department which, as far as I can tell from my dealings with them on this question, is very well run. But tell me, did I or didn't I hear the number 4.9 million or 5 million during your presentation? Because I didn't think I heard it.
The cost of living in the warrant article in that report. So it's the two.
You know the number I'm referring to, right?
It adds
Yeah.
raise the base from 13,000 to 15,000 on an actuarial valuation is 4.9 million. 3.3 is for the current 850-ish retirees, 870.
Right.
We've had some retire.
Right.
Roughly is a cash outlay of about $49,000 per year, and it becomes cumulative.
Yeah.
And in order to be eligible for a COLA, you have to be retired one full fiscal year. And what goes into this actuarial science is that when they're retired and they collect a COLA for 2 or 3 or 4 years, it becomes cumulative. Some people die, some people retire, and the cost is 3.3 million for the current retirees And for future retirees, it was 1.6.
Okay, so thank you, because that's the number I wanted to get on the table so that people listening at home and maybe my own colleagues on this board who have been saying to themselves, why on earth would someone, make an issue over an increase in the individual payouts to retirees that amounts to only about $50 or $60 a year. And the reason is that pension system math is unlike just about any other kind of math. And until you dip into it, you might have no idea that something this small, and it is small, it's not a large amount of money. It isn't, it's $50 or $60 a year. But because of the way it works, when it gets added to the pensions of all of those people for all of the years that they are retired, in a system that is already underfunded, for which we are appropriating money at a pretty rapid clip, it increases in recent years of over 7% a year, it adds up to $4.9 to $5 million that we have to absorb by 2030. And this is the reason that I will advocate, I don't know if the board will agree with me, but I will advocate no action on this article. I've asked Devin to put on the screen, I'm assuming people can see it at home. It's a simple graph that I made simply using the numbers for how much has our total budget increased in the most recent 10-year period, 2013 to 2023. How much has the cost to us of sustaining the pension system and funding the unfunded liability in the pension system cost? So 54% increase in total budget, 98% increase in the cost of pensions. This is what's known in simple language as we dug ourselves a hole. We dug ourselves a hole because the pensions promised to retirees were not fully funded. Eventually, the math caught up to us. State got involved and regulated that local pension systems have to be paid in full by 2030. We've been struggling to get our pension systems fully funded by 2030. It means that every year, the bite that the pension system funding takes out of our budget is about double what we can afford to pay based on the 2.5% base increase in our revenues that we get. To then, after all the money that we have put into trying to balance the pension system's budget, to then, as we're approaching the finish line, to suddenly say, well, we'll just burden ourselves with another $5 million so that individuals can get another $50 to $60 a year. The choice I would make is, I'm sorry to the individuals. I know $50 isn't nothing, but $5 million in a town that struggles year after year after year to do things like fund teachers, fix streets, pay for public safety, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But, find affordable housing for folks, you name it. $5 million is a lot of money. And I would not willingly add $5 million to the burden of paying off this pension debt by 2030. And so I apologize to you two wonderful gentlemen who provided answers to every question I asked, but I look at the numbers you provided me, and the conclusion I draw is that this is not a good decision for the town to be making right now.
We'll hear from Mike Salmon, and I'll give you an opportunity to respond.
Thank you.
I have I'm not as deeply immersed in the numbers as John is in this, but I do have a couple of questions that relate to numbers. One is that you cited the modest decrease during bear markets during the COVID aftermath of the COVID effect on the market, and the relatively modest decrease in the current market. And that suggests to me that you have relatively less exposure of certain kinds of
Assets, yes.
assets than in others. But that typically means that the upside is more limited as well. And so I'm wondering if you can tell us what the increases have been
Sure.
in a couple of bull market situations.
So I can tell you three numbers
Yeah.
that will be published by the Commonwealth. They come out with their annual report every year that our 37-year investment rate of return is greater than 8.8% every year. The last 10 years, it's over 10%.
Yeah, the last 10 years is
Right. So
makes me nervous.
But it does us all, and the retirement board is conservative.
Yeah.
But over time, whether it's the .com, tech bubbles, the 2000 era,
Right.
the pandemic, we can look at any point in time to say, oh, the stock market, oh my God, it's down. Warren Buffett looks at it as an opportunity to buy and make money.
Mhm.
I don't do the investment. We are in the State Investment Trust Fund, which is one of the best run in the country. We have some private equity exposure, which doesn't have a direct correlation to the current market, which has done well. Our 2021 rate of return was greater than 22%. In 2020, it was greater than 13%. And this retirement board has outperformed for a significant amount of time. 1 year or 2 years doesn't make this decision. 37 years of over 8.8% rate of return is greater than our assumed rate.
Okay.
And come 2030, and I agree with Mr. Van Scoyoc that $5 million is a lot of money. And that in 2030, right now, there's a $30 million decrease. And if the retirement board and the markets cooperate, there'll be almost a $50 million amount of monies that you'll be able to use for many projects and many things in the town of Brookline that is needed. The Brookline Retirement Board is trying to do their job, and they do it well, and trying to make as much money to lessen this burden on this board in the future.
So, well, yeah, I
Yeah,
just want to.
let's get through with what Mike wants to say,
Yeah.
and then I'll give you the
Yeah.
floor.
So it seems to me like one of the key questions here is, well, what will the rate of return be? Because that has an effect, as particularly as we get closer to 2030, whether we'll be able to scale back the contributions that we're making. in
Mr.
order to-
Cirillo
Yeah.
was jumping for joy when I called him today.
Yeah.
He's been used to be at 8.5, and he's been wanting to get that down to 6%. And he was practically crying on the phone today when I spoke to him that we're below 7%. We're moving that number down
Right,
because
It takes risk off the table.
yeah,
And we think it's the right thing to do, is to be conservative, because clearly the 8% that we had when I started with the board, we knew wasn't, a number, yeah, it'd be wonderful to have 8% returns, but that's why the lower the rate, the lower the rate, the annual rate, it actually increases our unfunded liability, if you look at the numbers. But our most recent actuarial report indicated that our unfunded liability has decreased by 8%.
it's went from 217 million down to 169 on a full market value. On the actuarial,
Wow.
it's at 180. So and again, I think Mr. Van Scoyoc says it, there's at least 100 different tentacles that make up this pension system. We saved 2.7 because a lot of retirees died during the pandemic. It's nothing to be proud of, but that's the numbers. There are many things that go into this.
Just to clarify, though, that was December 31st, 2022, right? Of
January
2021.
1st of this year.
January
yes.
1st. That's why I posed the question, and what has happened since
Yeah,
January
and we're down
1st?
about 6%.
Yeah.
We were down 9% 2 years ago at this time, and at the end of the year, we were up 12. So we do it over time. So
I wish we were here when the market was up 12%. But I think what motivated us this year, we haven't been here for 10 years in terms of trying to increase the base for COLAs. What I think was the motivation of the board, I know the motivation of the board, was looking at the cost of living and looking at, Social Security increase this year. And in that, we wanted to do it in a fiscally responsible way. And the last time we were here virtually with you folks, we didn't have the actuarial numbers. We have them now. We feel even more confident that what we're doing is fiscally responsible.
And many of the public retirees in Massachusetts, especially in Brookline, do not collect Social Security because of the GPO and the WEP offset. So thank you.
Because of the what?
The windfall elimination provision, there's two provisions that public employees, when they retire, they may get none of their spouses, or they could lose up to $512 a month of their own benefit. So many,
That's federal law.
Okay.
and
thank
so
you.
the public
And
retirees
that's
don't
with
get.
respect to states that don't pay into the
Social
Social Security
Security.
system.
Of which
And
there are.
many states do. so.
We're one of 13 states where that is the case. Mike, are you?
I'm set, thank you.
Okay. So Miriam has a couple of questions and then I promise you can.
I have a comment and a question. Well, I actually have two comments. The first is, I agree. I think you have to be very careful when talking about the stock market, right? It is not a short-term decision. You always have to look long-term when you think about the stock market. And if you look at the arc of the stock market over the pandemic, I'm heavily invested in the market. People like me did very well, right? And so now that we've had a dip, it's a dip. Hold your breath. In a couple of months, it'll disappear, right? So I think that's really
I hope
important
you're
that
right.
I am right. I mean, history, right? I know my history. And so history will prove me right. But I think we're missing something in this conversation that is really important, which is we are talking about actual people. And they're living on fixed income. And this money may not seem like a lot of money individually. It makes a big difference. And I really don't want us to lose sight that this is about real people who have really struggled in the last few years. So for me, yes, we hold many things as the select board. We hold our fiscal responsibility, but this is where I feel like, my fiscal import is tied to my moral imperative to take care of people. And so this is important to me. And I can't see how I would not be in favor of this.
Mike?
Yeah, I appreciate that. You're right. We're dealing with human beings here, with people who worked for the town of Brookline. So they're rather important human beings to us. But I do want to point out that they're receiving a cost of living benefit already. This is an increase in the base on which the
They
COLA
receive
will
their
be
COLA, right.
calculated.
And thank you for that, but still, I still support it.
So
Okay,
let's
now,
focus.
I don't want to quarrel with that. I just want to make sure that it's understood what
Let-
Yeah,
what's going on.
Let's focus on our guests here who have been waiting the entire
I've got
time that
all
we
night. I
have been
love
meeting.
talking about this stuff, so I'm in no rush.
Okay. And then we can talk amongst
yes, thank you
ourselves
for the
as to
clarification.
how
It's
we want to
important.
vote. So any other questions for these gentlemen before I give them an opportunity for their last, Bernard?
No, I mean, not to criticize your statement, but, I think what John was just saying is that we have a responsibility to care about the employees who are collecting pensions right now. But we also, in caring about them, have to make sure that our system is sustainable over the long term. And I think that's probably some of what John, I don't always defend you, John, but that's, I think, what he was trying to get at. And
I'm not.
and I know
we're
you
not
don't
in
disagree with
disagreement.
that.
I'm
right.
just saying if we only focus on the fiscal import, we miss something that's really important, which is this is about real people.
Yeah,
So I just
absolutely.
want to make sure that that's a part of this.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm one of those real people.
There you go.
Okay. John, remember, we have like 7 other warrant articles.
Yeah, I'm
so-
probably gonna go home soon and
Yeah.
take the rest from home.
John,
So I want to thank you again. And yet at the same time, I do want to just elaborate on something that you both mentioned. By 2030, we are working towards paying down the unfunded pension liability, the unfunded part of it. And of course, you're correct. If we do what we said we would do, then by 2030, there won't be any more money required from us on an annual basis to pay down the unfunded pension liability, but we will now be putting in enough money in on a regular basis so that we won't build up an unfunded. So it's not like we have, we stop having to contribute to the pension system.
Correct. That, the
yeah.
$50 million figure goes to 8.
Right,
Similar to if you were paying the 7.5% to Social Security
right.
as the employer end, which would be in and
But
around that.
that's the plan. That's as it should be. That's why we have been for the past 10 years, as was shown in the graphic, spending much more on pensions than we spend on everything else on an increasing basis, okay? Pensions is what they call the unfunded pension liability, and paying it down is, what a lot of people will refer to as a budget buster. It's one of those things that keeps getting, it's always bigger than our ability to fund it. And so we have to draw from other things in order to fund it. It's one of the reasons why we're in these contentious, collective bargaining situations with our unions, is because we're trying to hold them to, 1, 2, 3% increases in their contracts. Meanwhile, we're putting another 7% every year into the unfunded pension liability. And yes, that will end in 2030. No matter what happens, that will end in 2030. We're still going to be putting a lot more money, and I don't want to add 5 million to what is already a large amount of money we're going to put in. And the final point is, that's not the only unfunded liability we have. And so the good
We
news
got a better
is-
story to tell you with
I
OPEB
know.
in June.
The
How
good,
great that is.
the good news is we're going to have paid off the pension liability by 2030, but then we got to go to work on what they call the OPEB liability. And so there will be something else to have to pay down at that point. No matter what scenario I look at, I don't see where we're rolling in dough and we should just say, yeah, go ahead. We'll add another $5 million in costs to our pension system. That's all I'm saying.
I'm not going to argue with, that's your opinion about how it's funded. But what I can tell you, and I look at the long term, because back in the 80s and 90s, I think you might have had some concern about the funding of the pension, because I went through some old notes, and that this board voted one way or the other on COLAs back then. But I can just look at the long-term, short-term returns and the hardworking efforts of the board, the select board and the retirement board, that we all have the same goal to become fully funded, provide the best benefits to the retirees and employees of the town, and do the best for the taxpayers to get the monies paid off soon. There are many communities in Massachusetts. We go out to 2040, have that payment, and you'd pay tens of millions of dollars or more in interest. The town fathers have looked at trying to fund this as fast as possible to save the taxpayers of Brookline, the residents of Brookline, millions of dollars by having this paid as soon as possible. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Van Scoy, I can't argue with the $5 million number, but what I can say is that we looked at the funding schedule and the funding schedule that was adopted 2 years ago with our last actuarial report. And by providing this COLA, we are not increasing that annual amount that was set 2 years ago. And also, again, we can only base it on terms of what our actuaries tell us. And the actuaries have told us that in 2030, we will be looking at $30 million decrease? 38 million. And finally, that we have decreased our unfunded liability. Again, and we aren't, finally, this decision isn't driven by our market returns. Obviously, we have to look at the numbers in terms of whether we can afford it or not, but this was really based on the inflation that we believe is impacting everyone, and that's why we came forward with this warrant article.
Okay. Do you guys have anything else to add?
Well, we could add, but we
Okay.
won't.
Please
We
don't.
appreciate your time, your effort, and your concern.
Mike, do you, let's, okay. Any other, okay. Thank you very much. I know Miriam wants to transition to remote, but before she leaves us, should we vote on this and possibly warrant articles, what is it, 23 and 24, which are
yeah.
the artificial turf warrant articles? Okay. So usually the thing, so I'm very mixed about this particular warrant article with the point that John has made, but with the points that the petitioners have brought forward. Usually the tiebreaker for me is seeing whether or not the town administrator and his deputy are panicked about where we're going to find the money. I don't see that look of panic. So I will probably move favorable action on warrant article 11, and let's see how that shakes out. All those in favor of supporting favorable action on warrant article 11, which is the retiree COLA increase, say aye. Bernard,
Aye.
John,
No.
Miriam,
Aye.
Mike. And the chair votes aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time. Look forward to working with you.
And this was just a recommendation. You still have to get through town meeting.
We understand.
Okay.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Great, thank you. Okay, then warrant articles 23 and 24. Which one to do first? Maybe we should talk about the task force, since the task force now involves the select board, and then we can talk about the moratorium. I called it a ban, but I was corrected.
It's the same.
Any thoughts? Mike?
I'm not prepared to vote, so.
Yeah. Mike, do you?
Just about 23, the difficulty with 23, the obvious one, and it's been pointed out by the proponents of 24, is that 3 months is the period of time for a report to come back that's proposed in 23 is
Tight.
tight to say the least. It's squeezed by a boa constrictor. And the ability of any task force to do that and come back with a coherent report over the summertime, it is going to be a challenge.
I communicated that with the petitioner and
Yeah.
said the end of the year was, I think, slightly reasonable, that the current 3-month, especially including the month of August,
Yeah.
with a very contentious primary, is just, unrealistic to say the least.
And so his response,
I think the problem is 24, right? Because the decision for Driscoll needs to be made by December 1st.
oh, I appreciate that. I intend to vote against 24, but what about 23 is my
Right.
question.
So I think if you take Driscoll off the table, then there's no problem
Extending.
23. It's, if you want Driscoll wrapped into that, then
Do we know how advisory has come out?
the advisory committee voted to refer 24 to 23.
Got it. Okay.
So basically, they pointed to 23.
Yeah.
With their referrals.
Yeah, they
That's
put-
my understanding of it. Someone
Right.
should correct me if I'm.
Well,
misunderstanding.
what they do is, they put 24 on ice. They get, effectively it's neutral, neutered.
Neutered, yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose we can't amend it without going through the town moderator.
Amend 24.
Yes. To give us more time.
You mean,
You mean
you
20.
mean.
Oh, 23.
23.
Yes,
Oh.
sorry.
The question is whether it would be outside the scope to extend the time. That's always the
Right.
limiting factor.
I see Melissa.
I would just say that if you, you may want to take your vote and then I can run it by the moderator. And if it is not within the scope, we can put it on for next Tuesday.
Why don't we do that? I don't see a
So what
downside.
Would be a recommendation that we extend the deadline.
Yeah,
Yes, to December 1st.
Yeah.
right.
I mean, December 1st is the full date.
Right.
Or the latest possible date to make changes to Driscoll.
Okay.
So wait a minute, I mean, the report has to be reported on the first, because it's not as if the report's gonna say, do this or do that, it's just gonna provide sort of the different pros and cons of the two options.
I think that when is fall town meeting?
Usually the week before Thanksgiving.
So to have it ready for fall town meeting.
I still think that's very
That's-
ambitious.
Yeah.
August, I mean, nothing gets
Yeah,
done in
yeah.
August. Realistically, they won't start until after Labor Day.
So the last week in November. So we have a week to look at it, or Parks and Rec has a week to look at it. and
What's the
Okay.
date?
decision on Driscoll.
Okay. S- Am I moving an amended warrant article
Yeah,
23?
Sorry.
We think November 1 isn't doable.
Okay,
Do you think November 1?
no.
No.
Okay, so Thanksgiving is the 24th. There is some possibility that we will have a town meeting that starts before Thanksgiving and ends up after, which is not the first time that that will have happened. So,
Why don't we just pick a date? We don't need to
Town
tie it
meeting,
to
Yeah.
town meeting.
okay, the 23rd, the day before Thanksgiving.
I apologize to the volunteers now.
Well, they took on this task.
Well, they will. They
Okay.
haven't been identified. yet.
So I'm moving favorable action on, is it warrant
23.
article 23? Okay.
Yes.
As amended by the select board to extend the date of a report to November 23rd.
Okay.
Okay. All those in favor, Bernard,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Warrant. Okay, and I guess we will reopen if if we want to. If Mike Toffel wants to speak.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak. Mike Toffel, town meeting member, precinct 8, and petitioner of 23. So I wasn't expecting to speak tonight, but I also wasn't expecting an amendment. I just want to point out the logic behind having a date that was aggressive indeed. And I don't mind, shifting the date, but the point was to do it in sufficient time for town meeting to be able to consider the report, so that in fall town meeting, if with that information, they decided they wanted to pivot, they'd have that opportunity. So I just want you to understand that was the motive of why I put it so early. Now, I put it early enough so that people could read it before the warrant closed. Maybe that's too aggressive, but I would encourage you to consider whether you want the date to be sufficient so that if someone puts it on the warrant, anticipating what the report might say, that town meeting might have an opportunity to avail itself of the information as they vote in the fall. So it would just be a matter of maybe moving it back perhaps a couple. The key thing is town meeting has to vote, in my opinion, if they're going to vote in the fall, they want to be informed by this, and it has to be before December 1. So those are the parameters that we're working on. Of course, do as you please. My point was to give town meeting more information so that if we don't pass 24, and I hope we don't pass 24, people who in good conscience could say, let's get more information, then make a decision. If you make the deadline after town meeting, then they won't have that opportunity. Now, maybe that's your point, but I just want to make sure everyone's clear on that. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. I mean, I'd love for a November 1st date, but 5 years on the board, I don't know of any task force that has been able to do work that fast. I could be wrong. Any comments from select board members? Any moves for reconsideration?
Well, what does Mike think about the idea of November 1st? I mean, is he confident he can pull together a task force to meet that deadline?
Well, the warrant article says it's on us. So
Yeah, it's our task force. after.
On us
um,
to what?
to
report?
get the task force going and
Yeah,
appoint
appoint
it.
Okay, but, you know, does he, I mean, he's the one who understands what he's trying to do. Does he think that that is something that can be done by November 1st? I mean, it's not as if he's doing original research. They're just pulling together reports that are out there currently.
My concern is we meet once a week and we have a
Yeah, I
reduced
understand that.
schedule in the summer. So we haven't figured out how we're recruiting. We haven't figured out whether or not we want to interview people. So getting this on our agenda realistically, okay, let's shoot for June where we develop a charge. And then we hear from that and then we don't vote, we vote the next week. And then we start to put together a slate of people who will then be appointed. And then a doodle poll will figure out when they can all meet. Now we're talking maybe end of July, they meet for the first time, right? So do I think that they can do all of that work by that deadline? No, honestly, I don't. Not many task forces, except for, I think, the police ones that we had last year have met more than once a month. Volunteers just, you know, we all have other competing priorities.
What does Mike Toffel think about that? I want to get a sense from him, what he's thinking about.
Okay, Mike, do you think it's possible?
Well, just to be clear, the warrant article that I created had suggested that Parks and Open Space be the convening body. It's AC's amendment that kicked it to you guys. Part of my motivation of putting it in Parks and Open Space was because I thought they would be able to move faster given their more limited scope of what's on their plate. So, but given this is the motion that's in front of you, it's now to you guys. And I think I've been collecting names and encouraging staff to gather names so that hopefully one can hit the ground running right after town meeting with a list of names for your consideration. My hope is exactly what Bernard just said, which is this is not creating a study from scratch. This is compiling information. And in fact, over the past few weeks, an enormous amount of that information has already been compiled, even the report you received tonight.
I'd be willing to move reconsideration. I mean, worst case, they don't make it, you know, or they come with a report that hasn't reached an adequate conclusion. But it seems to me like I appreciate the homework that Mike has been doing.
Okay,
Yep.
you know what?
Yep. Let's give it
I
a shot.
can't wait to be wrong. We will move reconsideration. All those in favor? Bernard?
Wait, what are we reconsidering?
We are reconsidering, so we voted on an amended Article
Yeah.
23 that would extend the deadline.
Yeah.
To
We're now
November.
moving reconsideration so that we may vote on the November 1st.
So
Okay,
if I can make a suggestion,
Yeah.
November
Yeah.
4th is a Friday.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Let's do November 4th.
Well, I mean, that is still technically a change in scope that we will have to run by the.
Yeah, no, I understand that, absolutely. But November 1st, November 4th, or November 23rd are all changes in scope. So
Yeah.
what the hell?
Mike, is that okay? November 4th?
Yeah, great.
Okay, so I will move reconsideration. All those in favor, Bernard,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. And now I will move favorable action on warrant article 23 with an amended date of November 4th for a report due for the task force. All those in favor, Bernard,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. On warrant article, thank you, Mike, for piping in.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
On warrant article
24.
24, I will move no action. All those in favor, Bernard,
Yeah, with great pain, I'm gonna vote no action, or I guess I would be the response, despite having very good discussion with Claire Stanford today, who is in Utah, but the phone system is very good. But yeah, I vote no action.
John,
I'm in favor of Article 24, and so I vote no on no action.
Miriam,
I vote yes on no action.
Mike.
Aye.
Oh,
Which is
okay.
yes on
Which
no
is yes
action.
on no action.
I thought that was the pronoun and not the affirmative. And the chair votes aye. I would have supported this if it had grandfathered Driscoll.
Same.
Okay, we'll see you at town meeting.
All right, I'm switching. to
Okay,
my
yes,
phone.
we will take up living wage while you,
Great. Can I
go
just make
home.
one comment on the agenda too?
yes.
You have Article 12. Now I lost it. I had the agenda up here. You have warrant Article 12 to be considered. I
Mhm.
voted on, but 13 goes with it as a housekeeping article. So I just wanted to point that out.
Because it was housekeeping
Yeah.
and not
You're just
controversial.
not- Okay, got it.
There was a reason,
As long as you.
method to our
Yeah,
madness.
I love method madness. Whatever. I'm out of here. I'll be on my phone. And then hopefully home. Thank you to keep my kids from fighting over the pad thai I just ordered.
Okay, so let's do living wage first, and then I will figure out whether or not we do the budget. Depending on.
The living
budget
wage
is
article-
more important for you to participate in. So, Melissa,
living wage is actually a very simple, a very simple change. The advisory committee made an amendment to the original article, adding the word Brookline living wage to the words of the article. So my recommendation is to reconcile with the AC and vote favorable action on the motion as presented by the advisory committee.
okay, any questions? We've already had a public hearing on this. So now it's just time for us to decide how we want to vote. Yeah, why not? Okay. Any comments before I move favorable action? Now, this is on the advisory committees. Okay,
I would probably need to reopen your prior vote and then move favorable action on the motion as offered by the advisory committee.
oh, did we vote on this already?
Yes, you voted the article as originally presented by the Human Resources Director.
Got
And
it,
then,
okay.
and then advisory changed it, so we have to come back in line with them.
Okay, so I will move reconsideration for warrant Article 9. All those in favor? Bernard,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. And then I will move favorable action on the AC's version of warrant Article 9, living wage, Brookline living wage. All those in favor? Bernard,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. What's gonna take like 5 or 10 minutes while Miriam transitions?
I'm just trying to get onto the Zoom.
Special permit conditions? Who's doing that one?
That's a brief correction on Article 14. I believe Kara Bruton may be in the audience. She might be able to help us with that one.
Miriam, why don't you just,
Yeah, I just can't log in. Devin, can you send me just not the link, but just the thing, like the password number?
I believe she's hopping on, so.
okay, thank you. Sorry, we're trying to be a little flexible. Why don't we do the budget? How long do you think that will take, Melissa?
I don't think it will take very long. We covered a lot of it last or 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
This is just to report the changes since our last conversation.
Okay.
So, and we've also discussed this at Town School Partnership. So, you know, I think that there are a couple of board members that are kind of familiar with what's going on here as well.
Okay.
So when last we spoke, we had identified some additional revenue with which to allocate through the budget. We had made a recommendation for school allocation and town allocation based on the Town School Partnership formula. And then the recommendation on the town allocation was to put the entire amount in the collective bargaining reserve. Since that time, the school committee has taken a vote on their budget, what they've requested, and they're actually looking for $19,399 less than what was provided through the allocation. So that is then redirected towards the town. In addition, the advisory committee, they changed the allocation around the town funding in terms of they supported the addition of a new position in the planning department to support some of the efforts around the comprehensive plan, warrant Article 10. And so the amount for the new position plus benefits was allocated in the budget. If you have your combined reports up, a page, let's get to it. I skipped over to the living wage. If you look at the select board report, there's a couple of tables that outline the differences between the board and the advisory committee motion. If you page 53 of the report, if you're looking online, 8-10 shows the differences by department and by items on the budget table. But I think that the table that's on 8-6, which I can call up and let you see kind of how it looks here. Essentially, this is where the differences are between the select board vote and the advisory committee motion. So looking to potentially reopen and come in line with the advisory if that's something that the board chooses to do.
Remind me again what we're looking at.
So this is this column here is what you had voted 2 weeks ago with the school allocation, collective bargaining reserve. This column here is what the AC voted, which essentially reduced the school department by the $19,399 that I had indicated earlier, and then reduced the collective bargaining reserve in order to fund a planning position and the associated benefits of that position. So those are the differences that we're looking to reconcile at this point.
Great. So so we could come in line with the advisory committee if we vote favorable action.
You would need to reopen your vote and then the advisory committee motion.
So we've voted on this before?
So you voted before the advisory committee took their motion. So now we're reacting to that vote.
Man, shame on us.
Well, we wanted to get a motion in the combined reports, and I was worried that we weren't going to be, that advisory may not have one. So that was kind of at that point.
Okay. So I will do that when we know that Miriam is back online, but we've had the presentation and I will just summarize very briefly when she rejoins us.
And I see Kara's in the attendee list if you want to hop back into 14.
Great. Yeah. Let's talk about warrant Article 14 before we reopen the budget and then vote on it again. Hi, Kara.
Hello. So warrant Article 14 is, I think, pretty straightforward. Advisory made one small amendment, and this has to do with the article relating to conditions for special permits. Advisory committee is suggesting to add a phrase to one of the provisions that talks about construction mitigation performance standards, and that phrase is in little I. And the phrase is "and requirements for safe pedestrian and bicycle passage." So the idea here is that as the ZBA is expressly authorized to write conditions for special permits relating to construction mitigation that include thinking about pedestrian and bicycle passage. And that's it.
Oh, great. Okay. Any questions? Have we voted on this?
Yes.
So we'll have to move reconsideration and then vote on the AC amended language. Got it. Why don't we do that? I have
a question. It's Miriam.
Oh,
Sorry.
Miriam, you are on. Okay. Yes, please.
Yes. Melissa, can you just update, because the issue I had with the AC budget last time was this $30,000, sorry, $300,000 for the school, and I missed it. Can you just update me on how that was resolved?
Sure, Miriam, we jumped back into Article 14 because Kara joined us. And then when we're done with 14, I'll provide a quick summary of where we are on the budget as well.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so what we're doing right now is reopening our position on warrant article 14, which involves special permit conditions. I will move reconsideration because we voted before the AC amended. So I will move reconsideration of warrant article 14 on special permit conditions. Bernard?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And now I will move the AC amended language so that we become in line with them on warrant article 14. All those in favor, Bernard,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. So Melissa, if you can address Miriam's question, I know that the AC had taken a certain position, but my understanding is that they had a little buyer's remorse.
Yeah, so when we were speaking about this two Tuesdays ago, the AC were in the middle of their budget motion debate. And so at the time, they had moved, they did not move the recommendation on the allocation of funding for town and school based on the town school partnership agreement. And so a few days later, that following Thursday, the AC met, reopened their vote, and essentially voted the allocation with the exception of revising the school department funding based on the school committee's vote. So the school committee vote and the advisory committee motion are in line in terms of allocation for the school budget. And what we need to consider now is the town allocation. In addition to revising the school allocation, the advisory committee is recommending an additional position in the planning department to support the comprehensive plan and the associated benefits of that position. And the board currently has the town allocation going into the collective bargaining reserve.
Great, thank you very much. I just want to put a plug for the town school partnership and that it has 2 members of this select board, 2 members of the school committee, and also 2 members of the advisory committee. It's very important that all of us have a seat at that table so that we present a united front at town meeting. So I will move reconsideration of warrant article 8, the budget, so that we can become in line with the advisory committee's recommendation. It is their warrant article after all. All those in favor? No, reconsideration first. Okay, reconsideration. All those in favor, Bernard,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. And now I will move the AC's amended language on warrant article 8, which is the budget. All those in favor? Bernard,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. I can't wait to talk about this at town meeting. Okay. Thank you, Melissa, very much. So now we are down to CDICR, warrant article 12, 25, single-use plastics, and 26 Parks and Recreation Commission. We did lose Clint Richmond, I think, to the AC. Do we want to talk about single-use plastics? Do we know how we want to come down on that warrant article? I tried to watch as much of the last meeting as possible. It seemed pretty straightforward and had a lot of support.
Yeah, even I support.
Heather, I would recommend for Article 12 that that be deferred until next week. It sounds like CTOS is still working out some changes with the petitioner. So hopefully by next week, we would have a motion for you to consider on 12.
Great, okay. Thank you very much.
That takes a whole article off the agenda.
Half hour. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about warrant article 25, and then we will get to warrant article 26. I know Deborah Brown has been very patient in this meeting. Any discussion on single-use plastic warrant article 25 before I move favorable action?
Yeah.
Bernard?
Was this, refresh my memory, I mean, did we punt this to the Advisory Council on Public Health to come up with the actual items that would be subject to this? Or is that, am I thinking of another
Yes.
article?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So I forget whether or not, I thought the petitioner was in agreement with
Yeah,
that.
and
Yeah.
Yeah, if that's the article, the petitioner was in agreement.
Okay,
So, okay.
Mike?
I intend to vote in favor, but
Okay.
I'll wait until you ask me to say aye.
What
again.
you're voting on.
Yeah.
Did we lose Melissa?
I'm still here. If
Okay.
you want the reference in the combined reports, I think that would probably be the advisory committee motion, which starts on
310?
So the motion
Yeah, no,
itself starts on page 315, right at the bottom, or 25-10. That is the advisory committee motion.
Miriam, do you recall the debate over this warrant article?
No, I think this is,
Single-use plastics?
I'm thinking of another
Warrant
by the way,
article?
Yeah.
Maybe we table this one?
There's a specific list of products here, at least in the combined reports version of this. Plastic ear swabs, single-use floss picks, plastic wet wipes, so forth.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure what Bernard is referring to. It must be something else that.
Yeah, and off the top of my head, I don't remember exactly what it was, but
Yeah.
you remember it included the shaving cream that I use. And I think it was the PFAS.
I think that was a PFAS
Right.
one.
Got
So-
it.
So we amended that to, or the petitioner agreed to take away the listing of products and let the council come up
Yes,
with a
I
list.
think you are
Okay.
correct.
Okay, so I apologize.
Yeah.
So many warrant articles, although not as many as Nantucket with 107, but.
Oh, my
But
God.
they had a much
That was
more
the
interesting one than we've had.
Miriam?
Just for clarity, that was warrant article 22.
Okay.
Right.
So do we know how we want to come down on warrant article 25, which is single-use plastic? If not, maybe we should table this another week.
I don't actually know how I'm going to vote, so I wouldn't mind tabling it.
Okay, let's table.
Okay.
So the last article to be discussed or possibly voted on is warrant article 26, Parks and Recreation Commission. I am not aware of what the current iteration of this is, so if we could promote Deborah Brown, who is the petitioner.
I'm going to continue to share my screen so we can pull it up too.
Okay, thank you very much, Melissa.
Good evening.
Good
everyone.
evening, Deborah.
How are you all?
Very good. How are you?
Hay fever, what can I say? It's that time of
Yes.
year.
My apologies that you are last on our agenda. Can you just update us on where this warrant article stands and if the AC has taken a position?
I don't think AC has taken a position yet. I think that's Wednesday night. If I could very quickly, though, I'd like to go back to 12 and 13. We might actually have a yes by the time this gets back to y'all. I mean, we're down to quibbling over, adjectives. So I think we're really close. So I think that one should be pretty straightforward and at least for CTOS have a level of comfort with them. So I just wanted to put that in there. So,
okay.
But back to the idea of increasing participation in Parks and Rec to include kids from, struggling low-income backgrounds. CTOS, I think I'm meeting with them tomorrow. Tomorrow night's going to be busy. I think I've got them, and I think I've got AC as well. So I can't give you an update for purposes of what they do or do not want to hear. I can tell you that I met with, or some of us met with the Parks and Recreation Commission. And they said that they wanted to have it referred to them. That would be their motion, to refer it to them, or preference, and then have it heard at fall town meeting.
How do you feel about that referral?
It's problematic for me for a couple of reasons. This is not a new problem. And, and it's a sad commentary when I bring it up, and I don't even have kids. I brought it up in when we issued the warrant article, which was in February. And, we have never had one of those, I don't know, one of those Cliff Brown kind of conversations where you sit around the table and you go back and forth and you really clear up the differences. That hasn't really happened. So there's that issue. And two, I wonder if there's the expertise. I mean, a lot of what they do is maintaining park equipment, dealing with CIP, but not really bringing in community. And one of the things that they've said to me is that the bylaw is too general. Well, the bylaw was intentionally written that way because you always want people to have an opportunity rather than it being the Deborah Brown, bylaw, that it's a bylaw that's created by a group of people that involves robust community engagement. So, I think there's a misunderstanding between what a bylaw is supposed to be, what a regulation is, and for that matter, what a policy is. So, there's some real distance there. Who knows? Maybe between now and town meeting, we'll be able to resolve these issues. I think that there's a lot of good intentions, but from where I sit, we're looking at another year of children that won't have access to these services. We know that it's about 14% of the kids that are in the schools now that could benefit from these programs. We know that recreation is key to executive function. And when we start asking, why one kid has better analytical skills than another kid, that's part of it. When we ask, why do kids, break out by race when they're in the cafeteria? If you don't play with people, that's what happens. When you start looking at the economic differences, recreation is one way to bridge that gap.
So Deborah, just for my own reminder, because I was not available
That's right.
during
Yeah.
our last meeting. Am I correct? This was kind of a two-parter warrant article, one to put additional members on the, okay, so that part
no.
has been removed.
Yeah, that's been gone for a long time.
Okay, so this warrant article is really just about fully funding scholarships
Well,
for.
it's about fully funding scholarships, but it's also about saying you need to think more broadly about what you do parks and recreation. It's not just a program for, improving the parks. It's also a program for providing programming for people. And that's the weak part when you look at the bylaw.
Okay, so you were, okay. I know that we programmed $500,000 for what I thought was this purpose with the first allocation of ARPA. But you're talking about doing what, an analysis of all of the programs that Parks and Rec
Oh,
offers?
no. They offer 1,000 programs. Not on my most insane day would I ask that.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that, and I don't know if Lee is here, but really to figure out how do we get kids engaged in the programming. So like I've been talking to community people and the like, and I've had a conversation with Lee that we can find the kids. Lee has told me how much money she thinks she'll need to do this program. I'm committed to working, to figure out where that funding is, but I'm also acutely aware that you just don't drop money into it. There's got to be some thoughtfulness. And so, Heather, one of the things I say is much like you have a multi-year plan to look at the infrastructure of the parks and recreation, you should have the same thing on the program side. That doesn't exist. That's not part of the bylaw. So it's like, how are you going to provide? What are you going to provide in terms of services? What does it look like? Will it change over time? Because you're going to have an influx of, let's say, low-income kids. What happens that might be different? Maybe transportation is more of an issue, but that's kind of what that 5-year piece looks at. And it's also a part of the planning piece. I mean, I'm not saying you go from 0 to 100 miles an hour. I'm saying you have to start. And to the extent that Lee has identified how much money she needs, we have a good sense of who the kids are and where they live. Lee has 1,000 programs, and the summer is right around the corner. And I've been told that right now the classes are not fully subscribed. So we actually have some space. So I'm like, let's just do some of this.
So Deborah, I have to be honest, it's very difficult for me to wrap my head around what exactly this warrant article is and trying to do and where it kind of begins and ends.
All
But
right.
I want to open it up to other select board members to see if they have any questions. Anyone have any questions? Miriam?
Hi, thank you. So I don't know if it's a question really, only to say that I'm not that comfortable with the idea of referring to Park and Recs a problem. And I want to start by saying I have a lot of respect for Park and Recs. I think they do great work, but this is a problem they haven't been able to solve themselves yet. And so to me, we're just handing it right back to them and they still haven't been able to solve it. So this is, if you're going to vote no, vote no. But to me, referring it is a way of voting no without actually voting no. And so I'm not in favor of the AC amendment in any way. The other piece of this for me is as a parent, and I really do have to speak to this as a parent because, you know, I'm in this every day seeing what's happening with my kids at school. And this pandemic, I cannot impress upon you enough the effects that this pandemic has had on our children. And we just voted today recognizing that this is Children's Mental Health Awareness Week. And I don't know a family that hasn't been personally touched. And then you take families that really can't afford to do the things that their kids really need right now. So I just think this is something they need. This is, and can we, you know, where we get the funding or how we get the funding, I think that is on us. Yes, right. Everything we do has fiscal implications, but this is our children's mental health. And I'm telling you firsthand, our kids are suffering right now. And so this is the lens I bring. So that's all I have to say.
Any other members? John, and then Bernard.
Mr. Town Council, get ready. Our very patient town council has been sitting through this meeting, and I'm finally going to give him a question. I hope he's interested in and ready to weigh in on something. I'm a little confused about the Massachusetts statutes and park and rec commissions and whether there is in fact some sort of crossing of a line if a town meeting essentially tries to set policies for the local park and rec commission. Can you help us out with that?
Sure, but the issue is the many special acts that Brookline has passed over the years. First, to create a Parks Commission and then a Rec Commission, and they merged it. One of the more recent special acts related to Park and Recs gave them the authority to set their own fees and fee structure. So one of the things that I mentioned to the proponents, there were some concerns that I had that they addressed that they took out. But one of the issues was the Park and Rec Commission has the authority under the special act to do this right now. So a warrant article isn't necessary since that special act gave them that authority to do essentially all the things that the proponents want. I don't think that's going to be in sharp conflict, so I doubt that the AG's office would rule this warrant article invalid. But the Park and Rec Commission already have a greater authority through the special act that this warrant article would provide to them.
Okay. May I just follow up with a question for Deborah? You know, we all take different approaches to these things. It's just sort of in my nature that in the face of some of these very legitimate criticisms of some park and rec programs or lack of some programs, you know, one approach might be to go to the select board and say, you know, we don't think that the people you're appointing to the Park and Rec Commission are being very responsive to the needs of the broader community. And we think they have much too narrow a view. So as positions open up on the Park and Rec Commission, could we get some people on the commission who do have a broader view of the community and will take, you know, in the view of the proponent, a more enlightened view of programming? that's kind of, my sense of the way things might go. And then we avoid this whole business of, on the one hand, you've got people being appointed to the Park and Rec Commission to accept responsibility for making these decisions. And then on the other hand, you've got town meetings saying, regardless of what you may think on the Park and Rec Commission, we're going to make the decisions for you and tell you, what we think your programming should look like. And that's the kind of situation I always find myself feeling uncomfortable with. I wanted you, if you would comment on that, I'd appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Well, first of all, it's not my place to comment on who you guys appoint to boards and commissions. I suspect there are some people that are kicking themselves for appointing me to the Lower Boylston Study Committee.
Not me.
So, but that's why you guys that's what you're elected to do. And, I think it would be rude of me, and I just couldn't do that. That would make me feel bad. In terms of the commission's authority, council may see their authority one way, but I can tell you they have an incredibly narrow view of what it is they are supposed to do. And that's how we got to the warrant article. Now, in terms of, John, you spoke about specific programming. Nowhere in that warrant article does it mention programming, type of programming, nothing. It leaves a wide berth for Lee and her staff. And I have to say that those people get it. They understand what Miriam is talking about. So I would never, again, I would not presume to put myself in that position. That's not my wheelhouse. If you want to discuss hazardous waste cleanups, we could talk. So, but I do feel that given where we are now, and what is actually on the books, it is not clear that there is a responsibility around programming, John. And all I want to do is make it clear that one, they have a responsibility to create programming that is inclusive of low-income kids, that low-income kids can avail themselves of the programming for free if, they're free lunch, if they live at BHA properties, if they're Section 8, if they receive SNAP. And, once a year, they're going to tell you how to do it. That's basically what we're asking. And I don't see that written anywhere.
I believe Bernard
yeah, I'm not
had a
sure.
question, then Mike.
Yeah, I'm confused. Maybe that doesn't mean anything other than I'm confused.
It's late.
But I guess I don't see what the problem would be in referral to Park and Recreation if there is clear statement in the warrant article as to expanding the work of the or expanding the opportunities for use of the programs to low and moderate income kids. I don't think that and maybe we need to put different people on the Park and Recreation Commission, but I don't think that's the case. So that seems to be the sort of obvious solution to this problem, assuming that we're not overstepping their prerogatives as a select board member, under state law.
Mike?
Based on what town council has just said and what we understand anyway, Parks and Rec could implement this sort of a program if they wanted to. The one thing that they lack is not authority, it's money. Right. And so one question I have for Mel is it, if one were to say to the Recreation Parks and Rec Department next year, give us a budget number here, a budget number, and we'll work some sort of, at least the whole of it or a down payment on, or beginning to, a beginning payment on what it would cost to fully implement this program. Do you have a sense of where that money would come from? Is the money available before you get to the 2024, FY 2024 budget? What is let's say that these folks are motivated on the Parks and Recreation Commission for whatever reason to go forward with this sort of a program. Can they pay for it?
Well, I want to confirm that the select board did approve as part of an ARP proposal, an additional $500,000.
Yes,
to support this.
yeah, I
So
know.
I'm not sure exactly what you're asking about.
So
That
the
will be
question is
available immediately.
$500,000 sufficient to cover?
I don't know that.
Okay.
It's a lot of money, but I don't know. I
Right.
don't know what the scope is. What are we talking about? All programs, how many, what is the intended population we're trying to get at? I don't know those numbers. I have not seen those in
Right.
detail.
Yeah, I have some numbers if you want them, Mike.
Oh,
Okay.
well, go ahead.
Throw them out.
Yeah.
Okay. When I talked with lead Parks and Rec person, she estimated that best case that they would be looking at 500 young people. And she thought that was probably on the higher side of the participant numbers. And so she said that in terms of costs, that it would probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.1 million. And I suggested that she throw in another $200,000 to actually cover, she said, to cover the cost of additional staff. So it's 500 kids for, let's say, a 7-week version at $285 a week. Those were, and those are her numbers. We know that BHA has 354 kids, but not all of them will go. We know that in the schools there's 1,089, and we think that a small percentage of those will go. We also know, though, now that in terms of scholarships, that we're looking at no more currently of a universe of 90 scholarships that are awarded for camp in Brookline, fully funded, 90 total, maybe 30 that are fully funded. And I can send you the actual numbers, but it's not good.
Please do send those numbers.
All right, I will, Devin, I'll send you the PowerPoint presentation with the data before poor Devin gets to go home and go to bed.
Okay, any
Can
other?
I ask one question, Heather? I know it's getting late. I heard council say that the existing law gives Parks and Rec the authority to do a lot more than they're doing. But when I read our bylaw and I apply the quote unquote plain meaning rule, it's not there. It's just not there. And so I don't know how he gets to the place where they have all of this authority, because I didn't see it. If I had seen it, I would have come to y'all and just said, make them do it. But I don't see it. So, and maybe that's a sidebar conversation I should have with council given the hour.
I think the reference was to not just the bylaw, the enabling bylaw, but state law.
Yeah, but the state law,
Well, why don't we hear from
let's hear
town
from-
council
let's hear
since
from
he
you.
is still here?
But I can send Deborah the special act. It's from 1991 or 92, but it's a special act that Brookline went to the legislature to give the commission authority to set its own fees. So I'll send her that and I can copy anybody else.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other comments from select board members before we consider taking a position?
Are we ready?
We can talk about whether or not we're even ready to
Yeah,
take a
I'd-
position.
I'd like to see the numbers that Deborah's gonna provide us. Seems to me that that's sort of critical to
Okay,
any decision making.
so you would like to delay? Or
Yeah,
hold off?
I would like to, yeah.
Okay. I have to admit, I think, I actually find myself agreeing with John. I think this is a problem that we could solve by appointing different people to the Parks and Rec Commission that have, an interest in this particular lens. Or we could talk to the Parks and Recreation Commission about looking into creating a program like this and working with them to financially support it. I would also be interested in finding out how we can identify the people who would benefit from these types of programs, whether that means we're engaging with our community engagement coordinator or the BHA or the school committee. I mean, they certainly know their populations as to who's needy. They have a financial aid policy, for example. I think there are ways to get to this without having to pass a warrant article. It sounds like we are not ready to vote or take a position here tonight. Any other comments from select board members as to how they're leaning or more information they would like to see? Mike?
There are something on the order of 7,200 kids in the school system, children in the school system. And if taking the 14% statistic of kids who are from families who are either in the housing authority properties or are on the free lunch or subsidized lunch programs, talking about 1,000 children. And I think Deborah's right. You would never see all 1,000 show up. But Lee is probably not too far off when she said, it's a scientific wild ass guess, but somewhere under 1,000, significantly under 1,000 is the total number of children. I think that whatever we do, we should be looking at that. That's a place to start, making an estimate of the number of children. And then how many programs a typical child might be interested in taking, because it's not all camp scholarships Deborah's talking about. There are fees for individual teams and so forth that rec has. And we really do need to understand the numbers. The principle of doing this, however, to me is open and shut. It's so clear that we should be doing something like this. And certainly we might, through the chair, through you, you might say to the Parks and Rec Department, the Parks Commission rather, that this is something that the community is, it's an element of bringing more equity to the community. It's something that the community has moved towards in the last decade or so, and it would be helpful for them to take a look at what they're doing and consider how to integrate that into their programs.
Okay. Miriam.
Thank you. I'm actually going to really echo what Mike has said. If it's already within their reach to do this, then maybe the best thing for us to do, or in concurrence, maybe it's not, maybe it's a both and. I don't know yet. Again, I think I'm fine waiting to see the PowerPoint and the numbers, but the both and part here is, and we need to make sure that the Parks Commission understands that this is a priority for us as a select board. If indeed it is, it's certainly a priority for me. Echoing what Mike has said, it sounds like it is a priority for us. So I think that both and we need to say to them, this is important. Figure out how to do something here to make this more accessible, because as it is now, it's simply not.
Okay, let's get more information and figure out how to accomplish this. Okay. Thank you very much, Deborah, for staying until the end.
Hey, thank you, guys. I sent Devin the PowerPoint presentation. It has some of the information.
Great.
So,
Thank you very much.
take care.
I believe that was all of the warrant articles that we had on our agenda this evening. My apologies to some of the petitioners that we did not end up taking a position on the warrant articles tonight. But we are going to gather more information and hopefully we will have a position before the first night of town meeting.
Good heavens, yes.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you. That's our meeting this evening.
All right.